Hello and welcome. This course is about test-driven development. Now, let me show you what I mean. In our URL shortener, we need a function to generate a unique shortcode. Take a look at this test. We are testing a pure function. Now, given a length, it should return a string of that exact length. And given no length, it defaults to 4 characters. It should only use allowed characters. It should generate different codes most of the time. Each test is crystal clear. Each test is deterministic. Well, mostly we'll handle randomness in a moment, but the point is we know exactly what this function should do because we wrote the test first. And here's the implementation. It's simple, it's pure, it's testable, no database calls, no global state, just input, transformation, and then we have the output. This is why functional programming and test-driven development are a match made in heaven. Pure functions are predictable, and predictable functions are testable, and testable functions gives you confidence. Now let's get real. You're not just writing isolated functions, you're building features, right? So let's see test-driven development in action on a real React component. We need a component that displays recent links. But what if there are no links? What if they are 10? What if they are 15? We need to handle all these cases. First, the red phase. We write a test for the empty state. Now, given an empty array should render no recent links. We run it, it fails, which is perfect. And that's the red. Now, the green phase, we add a simple check. If there are no URLs, render the empty state component. The test passes, and that's the green phase. Now, test given recent links with multiple URLs should render the list, and we have our red phase. We write the implementation, green. But wait, what if there are more than 10? We need another test, should not render more than 10 links. The red phase, we add our dots slice, our green phase. Now, refactor, and take a look at this component. It is clean. We didn't just hope it would work, we proved it works. And here's the beautiful part. We are using a factory pattern for our test data. Take a look at this create populated URL function. It creates realistic test data with sensible defaults. We can override anything that we need. This is functional programming in action. Pure functions creating test fixtures. This factory pattern means our tests are readable. When you see create recent links, you immediately know what's being tested. No magic, no confusion, everything is just clear. And here's what happens when you write code this way. You stop worrying and you start shipping. You refactor the messy function, your test will tell if you broke something, you add a new feature, your existing test ensure you didn't break the old ones, you're working on a team, your tests are documentation that never goes out of date. Take a look at this end-to-end test. We are testing the entire user flow, visiting the homepage, seeing recent links, clicking through. These aren't just tests, they are specifications. They describe exactly how the application should behave. And because we build these with test-driven development, we have tests at every level. Unit tests for pure functions, component tests for React components, end-to-end tests for user flows. Is a safety net that catches bugs at every layer. This is what clean code actually means. It's not about pretty formatting. It's about code that's testable, maintainable, and confident. Test-driven development isn't just a technique, it's a mindset shift. You stop asking, does it work? And you start asking, how do I prove this works? You stop writing code and hoping it's correct. You start writing tests that define correctness. And you stop fearing refactoring, you start embracing it because your tests have your back. And when you combine test-driven development with functional programming, pure functions, immutability, clear abstractions, you're not just writing code. Now you're writing code that lasts. Welcome to this course about test-driven development with Next.js, Prisma, VTest, and all the cool functionalities and all the cool features. Let's dive in. Before we get started, for today's sponsors, we have Vendlinks. Now, Vendlinks is a digital product commerce platform for African creators. You go on and sell ebooks, videos, courses, templates, guides, and more. Upload your digital products, set prices, configure instant delivery. The setup process takes minutes. Get paid quickly, manage payouts easily. Vendlinks handles payment processing and it makes it simple to receive your earnings. Track sales, revenue, and customer data. Full business dashboard to manage your digital product business. It is used by creators across Africa. Writers, coaches, designers, musicians are all selling their digital products on Vendlinks. With Vendlinks, you can create, sell, and grow. For this, we are going to start by setting up Next.js and also shadcn UI, which is going to be our component library. All right, so I believe we all have some experience in setting up a Next.js project, and this course is just going to focus on test-driven development. We're not going to talk so much about the internals of Next.js. So if that's all new to you, I advise that you pick up a dedicated Next.js course. All right, so for the quick start, we're going to make use of create next app to spin up a Next.js application. And for that, I'm just going to copy this entire command that we have here. And I would go over to my terminal. So I'm going to cd, which is change directory, into a folder where I would like to create this new Next.js application. So for that, I have my documents, I have my projects, cd documents, projects, and then I have a working directory here and another here. All right, so I'm going to paste in the command. So npx create next app at latest. Now this is the name of the application, so I'm going to change this and I'm going to go with the name of tdd-url-shortener. Hope I spelled it correctly. And the --yes flags, as you see according to the documentation, is just going to skip the prompts that are used using saved preferences or defaults, okay? But for now, I'm just going to get rid of this just so in case the prompt changes in future, we are going to know which commands that I'm accepting here. And yes, I'm going to say y, yes for, okay to proceed, Next.js version 16. And it asks if we would like to use the recommended Next.js defaults. So the Next.js defaults are TypeScript, ESLint, Tailwind CSS, App Router, and Tuppleback. And then I'm going to say, yes, I would like to, use all these defaults, which pretty much is the same as, going with --yes flag here. And this is going to go on and install the different dependencies of our application. So as we see here, we have React, React DOM, and Next, and also some development dependencies such as TypeScript, the types for Node, React, React DOM, Tailwind CSS, Post CSS, Tailwind CSS, ESLint, and ESLint config next. All right, so this is going to take a couple of seconds and minutes, and I'll see you once this is done. Okay, so this is done for me. It's completed. And it created this application at this path that I chose earlier. So I'm going to cd into this tdd-url-shortener. And now I'm here, I'm going to open it up with Visual Studio Code. And to open it up with Visual Studio Code, I'm going to use the code.command here and execute. So here I have the project. I'm just going to zoom in on this project and come back to the browser. And the next thing I want to set up is shadcn UI. So npx shadcn at latest init command. I'm going to execute this command right into the terminal, and to open the terminal, you can come over to view, and here you would see terminal, or you can use the shortcut. So control and backtick here. And it's going to open up your terminal, and I'm going to paste this in here. So npx shadcn at latest init command, and let's give this a second to see the prompt that shadcn brings forward. And it asks us which color we would like to use at the base. I'll just go for the neutral here. and this installs the dependencies. You see here it updated the CSS variables in app globals.css. So right here we have the app and globals.css here, and project initialization completed. Cool. All right, so now we have chat-cnui in our project. The next thing we need to do is to get started setting up our testing packages. So we're going to, set up our playwright and also set up vtest into our project. So we're going to set up playwright in our project, and for that I just googled playwright, and you can click on the link which is going to take us to the official documentation. So playwright.dev here, and we can click on this get started guide here, and it shows us how we can go on and install playwright in our project. And this is the command we need. So npm init playwright at latest. So let's copy this command and come back to our project, and I'm just going to paste this command right into our project and give this a second to load. Now it asks us, where do we want to put our end-to-end test? Now for that, I'm going to create a playwright folder here. So I'm going to give it a name of playwright, and it asks us if we want to add a GitHub Actions workflow. I'm going to say no, but we're going to visit this so that we can go through and see how this works. So for now, I would say no, but we're going to set this up ourselves from scratch. Don't worry. And it asks us if we want to install the playwright browser. So I would say true, and it's going to go ahead and install the different, for now it's installing playwright test. And after which it is done, it's also going to go ahead and install the different playwright browser. So let's give this a moment. Could take a time, especially for the browsers, and actually it is done. And now let's go through the files that we created. So you see here it's created this playwright folder here, and it also gave us an example.spec.ts file, which is a playwright test file here. And we are going to know that all our end-to-end tests are going to be right inside this playwright folder. Okay, and we also have a playwright.config.ts file. And if we open up this file, we are going to see that it contains configuration, which is like a setup on how playwright, knows to run the test. So here we're going to configure everything that we need for playwright to use in running our test. No worries, I'm going to walk you through what all of these means here. And let's see if we have another folder, and we have already seen this example.spec.ts file. And yeah, so you might be wondering, how can we run this test? But before we run the test to see if this test that playwright brings for us passes, let's first of all know what we can configure right inside this playwright.config.ts file. So we're going to set up playwright in our project, and for that I just googled playwright, and you can click on the link which is going to take us to the official documentation. So playwright.dev here, and we can click on this get started guide here, and it shows us how we can go on and install playwright in our project. And this is the command we need. So npm init playwright at latest. So let's copy this command and come back to our project, and I'm just going to paste this command right into our project and give this a second to load. Now it asks us, where do we want to put our end-to-end test? Now for that, I'm going to create a playwright folder here. So I'm going to give it a name of playwright, and it asks us if we want to add a GitHub Actions workflow. I'm going to say no, but we're going to visit this so that we can go through and see how this works. So for now, I would say no, but we're going to set this up ourselves from scratch. Don't worry. And it asks us if we want to install the playwright browser. So I would say true, and it's going to go ahead and install the different, for now it's installing playwright test. And after which it is done, it's also going to go and install the different playwright browser. So let's give this a moment. Could take a time, especially for the browsers, and actually it is done. And now let's go through the files that were created. So you see here it's created this playwright folder here, and it also gave us an example.spec.ts file, which is a playwright test file here. And we are going to know that all our end-to-end tests are going to be right inside this playwright folder. Okay, and we also have a playwright.config.ts file. And if we open up this file, we are going to see that it contains configuration, which is like a setup on how Playwright, knows to run the test. So here we're going to configure everything that we need for Playwright to use in running our test. No worries. I'm going to walk you through what all of these means here. And let's see if we have another folder. And we have already seen this example.spec.ts file. And yeah, so you might be wondering, how can we run this test? But before we run the test to see if this test that Playwright brings for us passes, let's first of all know what we can configure right inside this playwright.config.ts file. All right, so how can we run our test? Before we go into that, this is a link to where you can read more about Playwright config. So we have the base configuration here, and you have, other options, how you can filter your test, advanced configuration. We have global setup and global tear down. And the global setup is in case you have you just want to run a piece of code before your Playwright test. And the tear down is just in case you want to do some cleanup after writing your test. Then you're going to need to have these two settings right here, and also have these files that are defined. I think we're going to see this at some point in our application. Okay, so that's it for the Playwright configuration. This is the documentation URL where you can also read and set more for your needs. How can we run the example test? Now we have this npx playwright test here, and we can run this command, and we can also run it with some flags. If we come further down, we see this flag _headed. So by default, without having it, our test is going to run in headless mode. And this is like an invisible browser mode. And with _headed added here, it means our tests are going to run in like browser. We're going to see the browser, and then we have like the project equal to Chromium. And because here we can choose different projects here, and this is the name like Chromium. I will say run the test just for that specific browser, so the specific project or browser. And you can also run one test file, so npx playwright test, and we can run this example.spec.ts file that we have over there. And if you come further down, you can see this show report. We already have this discussed about this in here, where we make use of this reporter HTML, and this is how it's going to look like. And you can also run your test in UI mode. Now, UI mode means, hey, don't just run the test. You open up a control panel so that I can run, debug, and watch them myself. So that's the UI mode. It more or less opens up this control panel where we can go through, everything, where we can go on and debug, we can run it, we can see everything happen for ourselves. So now let's go on and run this test, and then we're also going to update our package.json, which is going to have some scripts that we can run to run our test. So let's have this example.spec.ts file. You can see I have like these two green arrows here. If this doesn't show up for you, you can come right in here, the extensions marketplace, and try to install Playwright. So come over here and search for Playwright, and you'll see this Playwright test for VS Code by officialmicrosoft.com. Go on and install this, and once you have this installed, you can just reload your browser like developer reload, and it's going to reload your IDE. Sorry, not browser. It's going to reload your IDE. And if you still don't see the errors, you can come right in here, which is this test explorer. You should have this once you have the extension installed, and from here you can run the different tests. So for us to run our test, what I'm going to do is come right into the package.json, and in here I'm going to have a test script, and this is going to be running npx playwright test here. So let's have npx, and I'm also going to have another script which is going to run the test in UI mode. So I'm going to call this test, and I'm going to have E2E for end to end, and here I'm going to have UI. And this is going to run npx playwright test. So here we're going to have npx playwright, test, and with our double hyphen UI flag. And I'm also quickly going to update this to be test E2E like this. So now let's save this and run this script on our terminal. So here I'm going to run npm run test semicolon E2E, and then it's running the npx playwright test. So now you see that it is running this in the playwright folder example.spec.ts, which is this over here, and it is running them without, we're not seeing any UI, we're not seeing any output, we're just seeing playwright run our test, and then we're going to get our results in a bit. And here we have this npx playwright show report. If we click into it, it's going to open up on the browser, and we can see the report here. Okay, and I want us to run this in UI mode. So I'm going to close this over here. Let's run our test in UI mode. So for that, I'm going to open up the package.json and run this command. So test end-to-end UI. So run this command here. And this is going to open up an environment. It's going to open up a browser. So this is it. And now we can, execute this. We're going to see it load. We can pause it. We can go on and debug. Now it's going to go to the URL. You see it has title, and this is it. So you click into it, you run the test. You're going to see it like this is where it is now. It goes to this URL. It expects the page to have this title. It does have the title. Our test is passing. And if you also want to click on this to make sure it has the get started link, you're going to see it comes right into this test block. It goes to this URL. And now you see here is checking this assertion here to be visible, and the test passes. So now this is us running the test in UI mode. Now we can also run the test. And remember I told you initially what we did here was running the test in, so this npx run test. So initially what we did here was running the test in headless mode, invisible browser. Now we can run this with, so let's have this npx run test double hyphen E2E, and we can add -- headed, and this is going to open up a browser, and we can see the browser environment, and our test is failing. So why is it failing? Okay, so I know why it's failing. I'm just going to close this. So npx playwright test double hyphen headed like this. So this is the command we were meant to run. And now you see that it is currently running this test, has title. It opened up on a different browser for me. I'm quickly going to bring this right up here, and we can see it is, passing now. So we see it's running the test, and it is done. It runs the test actually multiple times, because you see here 6 tests are passing using 4 workers. So 6 tests passed, and we just ran, this test here 1 and 2. So why do we have 6? And that's because in our playwright config, we have 1 project, 2 projects, and 3 projects. So it runs these 3 twice. So we have 1, 2, 4, Chromium, and it also does the same for Firefox, and it does the same for WebKit. Now we can also like bring in mobile Chrome here in case you want to test for responsiveness. Maybe you want to make sure your site navigation comes in and stuff like that. We're going to see that. And now if you run the test again in headed mode, you're going to see how everything executes. So I'm just quickly going to like, yeah, it's here. So we have this here, different browsers. You can see the test running in parallel. So we have it in Chrome, Firefox, and also Safari, and now it is done. So I'm quickly going to like minimize this. So we see like the test here. We see this for, I'm just going to run it again so that we see everything. Or you can click on this. Now you can click this test and it's going to, you know, run the test. Or if you right click, you can see you have different options here. So let's run it one more time and see the test pop up right on here. So let's give this a second. Now we see the different tests running in parallel. Some still open up on my other screen that I have, but no worries. We see the test, you know, run here. Cool. So you see, and everything works fine. And yeah, so this is the mobile Chrome. So for the first test and also for the second test here. Cool. All right, so we have seen how we can run our Playwright test. We have seen how to run your test in UI mode, which is like a debug mode. We have also seen how to run your test in headed and the default, which is like headless mode. We know what all this means. We have also set up some scripts in our package.json where we can run our tests. And the next thing we're going to do is to write our actual test. So we're going to delete this and write the first test. We are going to write our first test. Okay. And for that reason, I'm going to delete what we have in the example.spec.ts file, and we are going to start from scratch. So right here in the Playwright folder, I'm going to create a folder for our home page. And in here, I'm going to create our home-page.spec.ts file. So in here, we're going to write, you know, the test for our home page, which is the /path. Now, talking about the /path, we are going to expect this test to fail because in our Playwright config, our base URL is still commented out over here. So here, and we're going to see it fail because then we're going to try to visit an invalid protocol by just going to a /path. So let's import everything we need. So we need test and we also need expect, and all these are going to be coming in from @playwright. So @playwright/test, and let's start. So we're going to have a describe block. So test.describe, and this describe block just goes on to declare group of tests. So it's used for test grouping. You can, you know, imagine this to be a test suite that has different tests in it. And here you have an example where you have two tests. This is just an example, and you have your test 1 and you have your test 2. So in this case, we are just going to have this for our home page. So here we're going to have home page, and whatever you have here, if you hover on this again, is also going to be like the title is going to be visible in the test reports as part of each test title. All right, so just have that in mind. And then we have our callback function, which is going to contain our different tests. So we're going to be making use of this pattern of writing test, which is known as behavior-driven development, where it makes sense to, you know, read it in plain English for writing out the title of the test. We can start by saying given, and then we say user visits the home page. Then what do we expect? It's like the behavior. So given that this happens, what should we expect? We should expect the home page to display the correct page title and also the description. So we can have here the description like this. And now we need our callback function, and inside this callback function we are going to write our set up our test and also have our expectation. So the first thing we want to do is to visit the the root domain of our application. So we're going to await page.go-to, and we don't have page, we're going to bring it in a moment, and we want to go to the home page. Now the first error we have here, we need to mark this as an async function. So we're going to come here and mark this async, and we need to bring in page. So from this callback function, we can destructure page from it, and this is going to be the page instance. So the isolated page instance, which is created for each test. Okay. So now we want to go to the home page, and we can have it stored in a variable which we'll call path, and it's going to be equal to /, and we want to go over to path. Now visiting this, as I said earlier, is going to throw an error. I'm just going to minimize this and try to run this test. So we're going to see the error, which is going to be an invalid protocol, because we are just trying to visit / and just give this a second, and we already get our error. So now what is the error here? We see that we have this page.goto error, which is a protocol error. So from page.navigate, because we cannot navigate to invalid URL. Now it is invalid, as I said earlier, because here we are lacking the base URL. So now once we bring this in, the playwright test knows that this go to path here is going to be like appending the base URL. So playwright is going to do something like this. So localhost 3000 and /, and this is what works here. And this configuration here, doesn't make us to repeat ourselves every time for the base URL. So we can just have the base URL here, and here we have our path. And now let's write our test. So we're going to await the test.expect, and we want to expect the page to have title. And what is the title we're expecting? So we're expecting the URL shortener. For that, I'm going to make use of this regex expression so that we also ignore capitalization and say URL shortener like this. Okay, so now let's go on and test our application. So I'm going to run this test, and we should expect this to fail because the title should not be URL shortener, it should be the default. From Next.js, it cannot reach this because we need our project to be running. So come here and npm run dev to start up your development server on localhost 3000. Now it's gonna be a valid URL, like it should be able to connect to this URL. And let's run our test again. All right, give this a moment, and now it comes up here and it should fail this time around. So give this a moment, and it runs the test, and you can see it's trying to go, it's at the home page and it's trying to get this, but it's not able to get the correct title because the correct title is the default title, create next app here. And let's see the error that we get. You see, the expected pattern is URL shortener, but it received this string create next app. And that means we can fix that quite easily by coming into the applications folder where we have our layout.tsx, and rather than have the page title to be create next app, we can update this to be URL shortener like this, and it's going to pass because shortener. Okay, so I needed an E there, and let me fix this in. Okay, so we have our E here. All right, so let's run this test again and give this a moment, and let's see our test. So now it goes over there, we have our URL shortener, and it fails. Now it fails because of spelling, so it expected URL shortener, and I have to fix it here like this. So we fix our test this time around, and our test is going to pass. Now, all right, so now our test is passing. We see one pass. We also can go on to test for the correct description. And how can we test for the description? So the first thing we'll try to do is to get the description. So const description is going to be equal to page, and from the page we can say page.locator, and here we're going to use a CSS selector. You see it needs a selector here. We're going to make use of this CSS selector like this, and we're going to have meta and use the square brackets where the name is going to be equal to description like this. Okay, so this is a CSS selector, and it's saying look for the meta tags, okay, and where the name is equal to description. So with this, we're going to like get the meta tag, and we can now test this meta tag. So we're going to have at this point we are going to have something that looks like this, where we have meta and also have the name, which is the description, and we also like have the content, which is going to be equal to some content here. Okay, so this is what we have by running this selector. Now we have our description. We can come further down and we can await, expect, and we want to expect our description to have attributes. And the attribute we expect this to have is this content attribute. So we expect it to have the attribute of content. And what is the value? So we expect the value of the content to be, let's say, create shorten URL like this. And after our test, we can come here and page.close to close the page. All right, so let's run this, which is gonna fail at this point in time because we haven't like given it this description. So let's give this a moment, and it's gonna fail, you know, at this point. So it's like waiting, and after some time it's going to fail. Why? Because it was expecting create shorten URL, but it's all generated by create next app. So let's fix it. We're going to come here, and the description, we're going to update the description to match what we expect. So we say create shorten URL. So that's what we want. And I'm going to save this, and this time around, once we run our test, we should expect our test to pass. So now we see our tests are passing, which is very good. And you see that this is the pattern of test-driven development. So you go on and write your test is going to fail, and then you're going to write the code which makes your test to pass. And we're going to be doing this pattern throughout this course. Cool. So let's continue writing out more tests. We have all our tests passing, which is good, and we're going to continue building up our application. So make sure you have your application running on localhost 3000, and just refresh your browser and you still see this homepage. Now we're going to change this, and you know our pattern right now. We write the test, we watch it fail, and then we update our code base. So let's imagine that this is a Figma design. Let's say the UI designer gives you this Figma design. How can you write tests for these, you know, following the test-driven development pattern? Okay, so now we have the page title, and we can call this the info text right here, and we can start by writing tests for this to make sure that, you know, these are rendered on the screen. So this is going to be like our H1. So this is like our H1, and then this could be a paragraph, and this is the fun of test-driven development. It makes you think about the implementation before you start writing hands-in code. All right, so let's start. I'm gonna come right over here, And I'm going to say test still on the home page. Okay, so I'm going to say given the user or given user visits the home page should display the correct page heading and the info description. Okay, so we know now it's going to be an async function. We have our callback function. We can destructure page from this already, and here we are going to have our test block. All right, so let's start. The first thing I want to do is to go to the home page. So here we're going to have our page.go to, and we're going to go to path, and the path here is slash. The base URL is localhost 3000. So that makes this our home page. Okay, so after the user visits this page, what next we want to do? We want to, let's say, call it heading text. So we can call this heading text is going to be equal to, and then we can say page dot get by row. We want to make sure that is a H1, and the row here we have different rows. So an alert dialog, banner. In this case, it's going to be a heading, and then we can also give it the level in this option here. So here we see we can have the level, and the level is like H1, H2, H3 up until H6. So this like making this your heading 1. And we can then have the name. So what is the name of this heading text here? And we are going to give it this name that the Figma designer gave, or the UI designer. So URL shortener. So here we're going to have it like this, our forward backslash hi, and then we call it URL shortener. And that's it for our heading text. So now we have the heading text. We need to write our assertion, our expectation. So we can await, and we can await expect, and we want to expect our heading text, and then we have different matches here, and we can use to be visible like this. All right, so now we grab the heading text from the page. Okay, and after we do, we expect this to be visible. Okay, and we can also go one level. So we can also await expect the heading text, and we can say dot to have text and to have this text. But you know, this doesn't really make much sense for us because that is also the text that we use to query this. So we query by this text, and this is going to give us back, and we say, hey, to have this text is like duplication here because it was from this same text that we were able to get it here. So we just need to make sure that it is visible, and this isn't actually needed in an ideal world. You wouldn't need to have this here. All right, so let's save this. And now we have our check here. We run our test. We're going to see our test fail shortly. Give this a second because we don't have the implementation. And you see it's going to fail. So now we're still running the test. And our test fails. Okay, why does it fail? It's because, no element found, and it's timed out. So to be visible, timed out. So it wasn't able to get that element there. Now let's go on and fix this. So we come over to this path, and this path here is the home page. So here we should have our app and our page.tsx, which is the home page of our application. Now I'm going to clean up everything that we have in here, and let's have our main, pretty much some JSX here, and give this a class name. Class name mean height of screen. And I'm also going to give this a BG linear to bottom right. And I'm going to give this from background and to secondary /20. And this main tag is going to have another div. here, and this div is going to have the class name, which is going to be equal to container mx auto, and it's also going to have a px of 4 and a py, which is equal to 12. And in here we're going to have another div, and this div is going to have some max width, so we can give this a max width of 2xl, and we're going to give it mx auto and space y8 here. And now we're going to have our header. So here I'm just going to leave this marker here for the header, and here we're going to now have this div, and this div is going to have the class name of is going to have the class name of text center, and it's also going to have a space y of 2. All right, and here let's have our heading. So we have the h1. Did we actually run our test? Yeah, we did, and we saw it fail. All right, so we have our h1, and this h1, I'm going to give it some class names. So I'm going to give it the text 4xl, and I'm also going to give this a font bold, and also give this a tracking tight here like this. And in here, I'm going to have the text URL shortener here. Get rid of this image import. Now with this change, I'm going to load our application, and our test now should pass. All right, so let's give this a second. Our failing test should now pass. So this is our test running. We have URL shortener, and our test is passing. Now we don't need this, as I said earlier, so we can already get rid of this. And if we make this to be, let's say, level 2, we're going to see our test fail, because this is looking for a h2 element, whereas we have a h1 element on the screen. So it's searching, and after some time it's going to time out and failed. So you see now the test is failing, and because it wasn't able to find any element with this level here. So I'll have this back a h1, and it's gonna pass. All right, so let's continue with our test. And the next test we want to have is to make sure that we now have this paragraph being rendered. All right, so let's do that. And here I'm going to come right here just after this expectation here, and wait, we can get like let's call it info text, and this info text is going to be equal to page.getByText, and getByText what? So what is our text? Create short shareable links in second. So here we're going to have create short shareable links in seconds. So this is it. And now we have the info text. So we just need to do what we did earlier. So we're going to wait, expect, and then we have our info text. And we want to make sure that this info text to be visible here, and we are good to go. All right, so now I'll run the test again. It should start failing, and then we're going to run the fix for it. So give this a second, and this is failing and it fails. So now this was successful, but now this is failing. And to quickly fix this, we can come right here and have our paragraph tag. And this paragraph is going to have some class names, and let me quickly fix this. So here we have text LG, text muted foreground. So create short, and then we should have a comma here, shareable links in seconds. And let's run our test. And our test is going to fail because here we added a comma, which we didn't have in our test. So our test is going to fail. Let's give this a second. You see it is currently here, and it's going to fail because we just missed a comma here. That should be here. So I'm going to save this and run the test again. And this time our test is going to be passing. So give this a moment, and now our test passes. All right, so let's continue. The next thing we want to make sure is to continue writing our test. Now we have two different components. We have this component, and we also have this component. Now this component here has a splash screen, like a default screen if there are no links. Let's see how we can test this and fix our application. Now at this point, for us to continue building out, let's say this recent links section, we need to write tests for this. And for that, we are going to be making use of vtest. Just a brief explanation here. Vtest is a modern testing framework for JavaScript and also for TypeScript, and is built to work perfectly with Vite. Now, I want you to think of vtest like Jest, but faster, and it's like designed in a way to work to write modern web applications. So in case you're not familiar with Jest, no worries, we are going to like see everything work out in action. So if you come over to the features, you can see what makes vtest like special. So it is super fast, because vtest only reruns the test that needs to run whenever you change something in your code. So it's just like you have this hot module replacement, but in this case for testing. Now vtest works out of the box with TypeScript and also with JSX, so we don't need like extra setup for this. And then we can also write React, we can write Vue, or we can write Swift tests directly. It also works in different environments. We see JS DOM, we see Happy DOM, or even Edge runtime for serverless functions. And for the built-in functions, it has things like snapshots. It also has malls, assertions, code coverage, concurrent tests. And overall, it just has this simple setup that we can use. So we're going to be setting up vtest. You see, we can also run it in watch mode. By running like vtest, then it starts the test in watch mode. All right, so let's see how we can set it up. We need to install vtest. Let's look for where we have like the get started guide here, and how we can add vtest to our project. So we need to run npm install as a development dependency vtest. So I'm going to copy over this command and come over to my terminal, and right here I'm just going to open this up and npm and just paste it in. So npm install as a development dependency vtest. So once this is done, we are gonna have to like configure vtest. I know we said earlier that vtest comes with simple or no configuration, but we also need to like set it up to work well for our project needs. So let's wait for this for the installation to complete, and once it is completed, we're going to set things up. So now it is done for me. The next thing I want to do is to create a vtest.config.ts file. So right here in the root of the application, I'm going to create this vtest.config.ts file, and we're going to write a different configuration on how we intend to run our test right in here. So couple of imports from vtest config. So let's go on and import. We need to import define config, which will come in from I know there's a typo there, vtest config. So this should be define config like this. Okay, and we also need to bring in merge conflict here. So over here, I'm going to have this const, which we're going to call root config. And this root config is going to be equal to define config. Now, we are going to pass some plugins in here into this define config method. And the plugins we are going to pass in here is an array of plugins. So we're going to have two plugins. One is React, and the other is for tsconfig path. So here we're going to have tsconfig path like this. And what is this doing? So we need to import the React plugin for Vite so that we can go on to handle JSX and also TSX. So here, let's bring in React, and React is going to come in from at vite.js/plugin/ React. No worries, we need to run the installation for this. And also the same thing for tsconfig pack. So this tsconfig pack is going to be help us to resolve TS path aliases. So let's say at /components. This is going to help us to resolve the path aliases, and it also needs to come in from vite tsconfig path. So let's run the installation for this npm install. So I'm just going to copy this and we can have this installed here. And also for this, have it installed right in here and execute. All right, so we can also have resolve in here, and this resolve is just going to be an empty object for now because we can add custom module resolutions here if we need, but we don't need that because we're going to be making use of tsconfig path for the path alias configuration. What else can we pass to this define config? We can also pass the server here, and for a server we want to be making use of port 3000. Okay, and this is like the dev server which is going to run on localhost 3000, and we can also pass allowed host true. So what this means here, what this true means that we are passing in here is just like allow all connections from every host, and that's what this is doing over here. So now we have defined our root config. We can also like do more. If we come further down, we can now have like our test configuration. So here I'm going to have our test config, and this test config is also going to be making use of define config right in here. Now, what do we want to, configure inside here? So the first thing we're going to pass here is for our test, and this test is going to be an object, and we can say here globals true. Now, globals true is going to allow using global test functions like, let's say, describe, like test, like expect, without having to import these in every test file. So we can have our test and we don't need to like import describe, import test, all those kind of things. And that's why we make use of globals true. And let me just disable this for a moment. And we can also come in here and have our projects. So after globals, we can have projects like this. And what is this project going to do? So we're going to have different projects here. Now, the first project we are having here is just for, let's say, plain TypeScript without plain TypeScript unit test. So we're going to have unit test of our application, and this is like the plain TypeScript test. So let's say a function that adds two numbers, that kind of thing is going to belong right in here. And yeah, let's define it. We're going to have this object, and here we're going to first of all spread out our root config, and that's why we defined it here. So we don't have to duplicate this for different projects here. So each project can already make use of the root configuration here. And then we can have our test, because this is a project. So this project is going to have its own test configuration. And the first thing we want to do, since this is going to be a unit test, we want to go on and include the path that we want VTest to be able to pick up this kind of test. And for that, we're going to have this include, and include is an array. And here we're going to say, okay, any path that matches this regex here is, we want you to go on and run the test for this. And this means any test, any files that is ending in .test.ts in the test folder. So we need to have a test folder living right inside of this root folder, which we don't have yet. Any of those tests there, make sure you pick it up, and we want to give it a name, and we can also give it a name and say this is going to be our unit -test. Okay, so we are going to have another project here, so we need a comma here, and this other project also needs to spread the root configuration, and then we're going to have the actual setup for this. Now we need this to be our React test, if you may, and that's why the environment here is important. So the environment here is going to be, we have different environment: edge runtime, happy DOM, node, which is the node environment, JS DOM, happy DOM. So JS DOM is like the JavaScript version that still goes on to run in a Node.js environment. And then we have the JS DOM, and what this JS DOM is, it's like then VTest to make use of a lightweight DOM simulation for React component testing, which is what we want in this case. And we wanted to also give it the path. So we're going to say, hey, include. And now, because it is for React component testing, it doesn't just have to end in .ts like this. I'm going to copy everything we have here. And this time around, it's going to be like any test, actually. I'm just going, because now it must not live in our test folder, right? we can have a components folder here, and in the components folder we can write the test for that actual component there. So in that case, I'm going to get rid of this, and we're going to say double asterisk / and then an asterisk dot test.tsx, and this is saying include all test.tsx, all test tsx files. So wherever they are, make sure you include them when you're running your test. And we can give it a name, and the name could be let's say react double happy double hyphen dom hyphen test. Okay, so it's just the name for the logs. That's the name you're gonna see on the logs. And we can also like provide some setup files for this. So here we're going to have this setup files, and for now we don't have this file, so we're going to be creating it in a moment. And this setup file is going to live inside the test folder. So we're going to have a test folder which is going to contain this actual file. So setup hyphen browser, because it's for the browser test, hyphen test hyphen environment.ts. So we need to actually create this exact test setup file here, which we're going to do in a moment. So this setup file is going to run before the test, which is going to configure React testing library. It's also going to do some cleanup and also some just DOM matches, and that's why this is important. And after this project, we also want to tell it to exclude, because we don't want retest to run or to pick up some files that I included, let's say in node modules. We want to make sure that we have these excluded. We also want to exclude our .next. We also make sure we exclude our distribution folder, which is the folder that we get when we build or compile our application. And we're saying like, hey, ignore these folders when searching for our test. Don't go into these folders to search for our test. And we can also have some coverage here. And what is this coverage going to do? This coverage is going to like take in a reporter, and this reporter is going to be an array where we can say we can pass text, we can also pass JSON, and we can also pass HTML in here. So HTML like this. And what are we doing here? We're starting to output coverage results in multiple formats. We're telling VTest to output the coverage results in the terminal, so terminal text, JSON file, and also HTML report. So now we are done with this. We need to merge our actual configuration. So now we have our test config, we have our root config. We are going to make use of the merge config here. So let's export default, and we're going to be exporting merge config, and the merge config is going to take the root config and also our test config. So again, this merge config is going to merge the root vt config with the vtest test config, and just this allows all our tests to run while we keep all the vtest settings. So that's what we need for setting up vtest. The next thing, let's not forget that we need to have this test folder here for our setup, and we're going to set it up in the next video. Last time out, we wrote out this vtest config.ts file, and now I want us to go on and create this setup browser test environment.ts file where we can have some setup for our React testing, which is this test project that we have over here under the projects folder. Okay, so for that, this test have to be in the root of the application here, because that's how we defined it here. So right in here, which is the root of the application, I'm going to create this folder and call it test. And in here, then we're going to create this file, which is the setup -browser -test -environment.ts. All right, so what do we need for this setup? I'm going to start by importing cleanup. So cleanup should come from, so here cleanup, and cleanup is going to be coming in from at testing. We don't have it yet, so at testing -library /react. So we want to have this cleanup, And we also need to bring in this hook from retest. So we're going to be importing, and this hook we are bringing in from retest is called the after each hook. Now here, after each, no worries, I'm going to explain in a second, and we have our callback function. We are going to call cleanup like this. So let's quickly run this installation here. So npm install and at testing-library/react. Now, the purpose of this is to set up a React testing library correctly for each test, which we are not doing for now. We're going to do that in a second because we also need to have the just DOM retest library. So let's import that. So we're going to import at testing-library, and now we need the just DOM/retest, which we don't have. So let's go on and run the installation. I'm going to copy everything here and let's see what this does in our project. Now, this is so important, and if we don't have this, our test isn't going to work as expected because this installation failed, because this should be just -dom. So I'm going to run this again. So just -dom, sorry about that. Now, again, as I said, the purpose for this is so that we can correctly set up React testing library for every test we have in the application. This is so useful because it brings in the extra matchers that we need. So extra matchers, like let's say to be in the document. Without this, we're not going to have access to those extra matchers. And then our test is just going to be like to be truthful style of assertions. No worries. We can comment this out and we see how this goes on to affect our test when we have them. And then this cleanup that we have here is just going to go on and unmount the React components, and it's also going to clear the DOM after every test. And this is so important because we don't want our test to leak states into each other. So this cleanup is going to make sure that that's possible. You can imagine a scenario where we have a button in one test and we don't, where we render a button in one test and we don't clean it up. Now, the next test might still go on and see that button. So after each is a hook from retest, which is going to automatically help us to clean up after each test. So this is going to run after each test. You see here, it registers a callback function to be executed after each test with the incorrect suit has completed. Now you see here it's useful for scenarios where we want to clean up or we want to reset the test environment after each test. And that's what we're using it for in this case. We are calling this cleanup, which is, hey, the bottom line is, ensuring that each test starts with number one, a fresh DOM, and here we can go on to make use of rich DOM matchers, and two, this cleanup make sure that we unmount the React component and we clear the DOM so that we don't leak state into other test cases. So now we have this set up for our browser test. We can continue, but before we continue, actually we missed something which is we don't really need now, but can come in so handy when writing test, and that is the config. So over here we can also have a config. So I'm going to have the config defined in here, and this config is going to be coming in from the .env package. So here let's import config, and config is going to come in from .env, which we need to install. So let's run the installation. So npm install.env, and this is going to go on and load the environment variables right away. Now we can also like set this up if we don't want this to be here. We can have like we can have this in our setup files, but now this is just making sure that this is available for all the test projects that we have here by defining this config. You can also pass some extra configurations like debug.env key, encoding path. So the path to where you have your environment variables, and in case where you have, let's say, the path to be in .env.test, you can have that right in here like this. So .env.test, if your test makes use of this kind of path for having your environment variables. But in our case, we're just going to keep it simple and just make use of the config like this. All right, so now we are going to focus on how we can build out this aspect of our application, the recent links section. And you see, by default, when there are no links, we have no links created. We want to make sure that we are displaying this when we don't have any link created. So we need a component for this. Okay, so we can go on to create this component so that we know what we need when there are no recent links created. We just want to display this text that says no links created yet. So in that case, we need extra setup. Now this setup is for our entire test cases and not just for testing out this component. And we need to create more like a utility that we can use when testing out our different components. For that, right into this test folder, I am going to create a React. So in here, I'm going to create this react-test-utils.tsx file. Now, why is this so important? Because we're going to be importing from here rather than importing directly from testing library React. So first, let's bring in this type. So we're going to import this type, and this type is the render options. So here, let's have render options, which will come from @testing library/React. And we also need to import render. Render will come from @testing-library React. And we also need two more imports for the types. So this type will actually come from React and is the React element as well as the React node. So let's import React element and also bring in React node, which will be imported from React. Now we're going to create like all the providers kind of setup, and this is a setup that we need because in future we might have our application making use of things like authentication provider, making use of a team provider, and in that case we don't want to wrap all our tests with these providers. Now this is going to help us to just have this setup here where we can easily plug in the providers that our tests need in one place and our test should run as expected. So const, we can call this all the providers, and I'm going to bring in this here and it's okay. So here we have like all the providers, which is this function. It takes in this children prop that we destructure because this is a valid React component. And you see that this children here is of type React node, and then we're going to return nothing for now. In future, we can have our context. In future, we can have our team. In future, we can have whatever that we need for our entire application. We can have it wrapped up in here and our test should pass. Now we have this, but we are not like displaying this anywhere. For that, we need our own costume render, which are going to export as render just to make sure that so this costume render is going to build up of what we have in this render here, but now we're going to customize it. That's why it's called a costume render. So const, let's have our costume render, which is going to take in the UI. UI is of type React element and is also going to take in options. Now options is going to emit wrapper, and the reason why we are emitting this wrapper as part of the options is because we already make use of this wrapper for all the providers, and then when we pass in options. So we don't want a scenario whereby and making use of this our costume render somehow wrapper is being part of the options, because we don't want that. We already explicitly make use of wrappers here, hence we don't need it to be part of the options. So we call render, and render is going to render into a container which is appended to the document body. Okay. And that's why you see over here it should be used with cleanup. We already have our cleanup. So here we render our UI, which is this React element here. And then we have our options. When I said we already have our cleanup, I was referring to this over here, which does this cleanup for us here. All right, so we have our costume render. Now let's export everything from @testing library React. We're going to export everything from testing library React. We also need to go on and override the render method. So we're going to export costume render as render here. So here we're exporting it as render. So whenever we import render, we're actually importing our costume render. And the last thing we need to do is to export user events. So in case of, let's say, cleaning and things like that, We also need our user event. So for that, I'm going to export default as user event, and this is going to be exported from at testing library /user event, which we need to install right into our application. So I'm going to copy this and let's run the installer at testing library /user event. Now we're going to see this in action in a moment because we're going to use this to write our test. And yeah, so let's come back and see how we can make use of this. We have done loads of setup. We have set up a browser environment, which helps us in cleanup. And we made sure that this file is being used in our vtest config right over here for our setup files. And we also created this utils where we can make use of our own custom render and our own provider, just in case we have any provider that we use in our application. Now all this is good, and now we can go on to test our first scenario whereby we don't have any links here. So we want to display this, show this card, and we also want to make sure that it shows no recent no links created yet. And for that, let's come right into the components folder, which we don't have yet. So in the app, I'm going to create a components folder actually in the root. So here, create this components folder. And right inside this component folder, I'm going to create a new file. So we're going to have our no-recent-links. We can call it links card.test.tsx. Vtest, if we check our vtest config here, we see that the vtest config is going to look for files that look like this. So the test.tsx, which in this case, this matches that. And then this is the name, which we, for the logs purposes, and it's going to make use of this setup for this test project. So test like this. And yeah, so let's bring in everything we need. We need to bring in describe. Well, describe now is going to come in from vtest. And we need to bring in the component which we don't have yet. So in a moment, we're going to create this component. We can call it no recent links. I'm not quite sure about the name, but for now, let's work with this. And this is going to be coming in from no recent links card. And then we also need to bring in our render and screen. But in this case, they are not going to be coming in from testing library React. They are going to be coming in from React test utils, so our own test utils. And this is going to be from @/test. And there we have /React test utils like this. And this should be render. Let's have our describe block. So describe, and describe is going to take in the name. And I'm going to give it this name, so no recent links card like this, and close up the describe block. Now in here, we can have our test. And this test is also going to take in like a title, like a name, and then we can say, giving no props, because this component is not going to take in any props. Should render or should display correct heading and description like this, and I'm going to close this up. Okay, so now we have this error because we haven't brought in tests, so we need to go on and bring in test from vtest. So test should come in from vtest here, and now we can come here, and the first thing we want to render the component. So for that, we are making use of this render, and see where it comes in handy. Over here, we define our own render, so which is this custom render, and in this case, we are passing UI to it without passing in any options. And this is going to render the UI, and for the wrapper, it makes use of like all these providers, and whatever we put in here is also going to be like the parent of this component. And after the render, we quickly can have our expectation, we can have the heading, But in this case, I'm just going to have our expect, which also needs to be imported from vtest. Okay, we already have that. So we're going to expect our screen, and screen we want to get by row, and the row we want to query is the role of heading. So the role of heading, oops. And then we also need to pass in our, our options, and the level is for H2. So let's expect this to be a H2. And for the name, we can give this a name of, let's say, recent links like this, recent links like this. And we can expect this to be in the document. So to be in, we can expect this to be in the document like this. And then we can also expect like no links created yet. So we can also expect no links created yet to also be in the document. So I'm going to bring this in, get by text. So let's change the text. We know that the text we expect here is no links created yet, like this. Okay, so quickly let's fix this error. For now, I'm just going to have our components no links create.tsx, no links, no recent links card.tsx, and quickly I'm just going to export function no links created card, and here I'm just going to return fragment for now, like this. And now this test should no longer fail because we have that link, and if we should no longer get this error because we have the file now, and save this. So how can we run our test? If we come over to the package.json, we don't have any script for running our v-test. So for that, we're going to create a new script here. And this test is going to be like v-test, but now we can pass some extra configuration to these extra flags. And I will also pass this -- reporter flag. And we're going to say reporter is going to be equal to verbose like this. And what this says is show more details. So go on and show more details for each test. So we're going to see the test name, whether it passed or failed, and sometimes we can even see the timing on how this test ran. And without this flag, v-test is just going to go on and show us only a summary. Let's say we're just going to see things like 5 tests passed, 1 failed, those kind of stuff. That's what we'll see. But now with verbose, we are going to see more details. All right, so for that, we can run our test. So we can come here. I'm just going to clear this up, npm run test, and our test is going to fail. And we see that we have our test failing. Now, why is it failing? It fails because cannot find package happy-dom. And if it can't find it, that means we also need to run the installation for it. So I'm going to quit this and let's run the installation. So npm install -d and then happy-dom like this. Okay, so now we should be able to find it, and let's run our test again. Oops, let's run our tests. I'm going to run npm run test, and this time around our test should fail, but not because it can't find the happy-dom. So now it fails. Why? Because it's unable to find an accessible element with the role heading and the name of recent links. We're cool, which makes sense, and that's why our test is failing. And the next video, we're going to make sure that this our test passes and making sure that this recent links card component does what we expect of it. Let's continue. We need to set up this component to work as we expect. We need to make sure that it displays a heading and it also displays this text, no links created yet. And for that, we need to make use of shadcn UI card component. So let's come over to the browser here. Now here in the shadcn UI documentation, we can come over to component, and for card, because we need to make use of this card, this is what we need to install. So npx shadcn @latest add card. So let's copy this and put this right here. So let's install this. So npx -cn at latest add card. So let's wait for it to install, and we can already start making use of it. I think it's done now. So we can bring in the card from the UI card here, and let's also close this up. And inside this card, we're going to have a card header as well as a card title. So here we're going to have our card header, which will come from UI card, and then we're going to have our card title, and this title can say recent links. And after this, then we can have, this should actually be inside of a H2 because that's what our test expects. So here, let's have the H2 and have the recent links. Now, after the card title, we can have our card description, and that card description should be a paragraph that says no links created yet. Remember, here we have a full stop, and if we don't have that in our test, it's gonna fail. So let's add this here and run our test again. So npm run test, and this time around our test should pass. You see our test passes. So here we get the name, so React Happy Dump Test, which was the name that we gave our test right in here. So we see it for the logs. It also show the component, and we see the describe block. So this no recent card links is the describe block that we gave it here, and this is the actual test that passes. Cool. So our test is passing. It's also important that we take a look at the UI. So npm run dev to see how our application currently behaves. We don't render this anywhere. It's just a standalone component, so there's nothing for us to see. And if our application loads, we still get the heading from previous. Okay, so now we're going to make use of this component, and we want to make sure that we display like another component here, because the first component we're going to display is when there are no links, we want to display the card, but when there are links, we want to display another component. So in that case, we know we need another, like a higher level component that is going to check like, hey, let's say if we don't have any links, then display this component. So for that, let's go on and build it. At this point in our application, we need to build out this section of the application. So we know that when there are no links, we display this component, and when we have URLs, when we have recent links, then we go on and display this other component. And for us to have a list of URLs, we need to fetch these URLs from a database, and for that we need to set up our Neon database. So come over to Neon, and then you'll be prompted to sign up. So let me go over to the URL. You can just Google search NeonDB, click on the link you see, which is going to take you over to neon.com. And just for a brief introduction of what Neon database is. So Neon is a serverless Postgres database, and basically it just gives us a full PostgreSQL database in the cloud, and we don't have to worry about things like servers, like scaling, or like backups, and it's so popular for our modern web applications. So it's serverless. It gives us the Postgres compatibility. It is edge ready, which means it's good for fast connections for global applications. And it also has a free tier, and we are so much interested in the free tier package to build out our application. So do sign up or log in as the case may be. For my case, I already have an account. So this is my console, and over here you would need to create an organization. If you don't have one yet, I'm currently on this Bright organization. You would need to create an organization, and you can only create one on the free tier. And if you want to create more than one organization, then you need to pay $5 per month, provide the organization name, and go on to create the organization. So all right. So I already have one project within this organization, which is this demo project here that I created. So I'm going to create a new one, and I'll call this one tdd-url-shortener like this. And for the Postgres version, it is Postgres 17, and the settings can remain the default that we have here. And you go on and hit create. This is going to go on, spin up this project for us, and we're going to have access to a database that we can connect with. And for us to connect to this database, we need to make use of Prisma ORM. Now, Prisma is an ORM which stands for Object Relational Mapper, and it helps us to connect our Node.js, our TypeScript applications to our database. And it also provides this type safe API that we can use for our CRUD operations. So we need to have Prisma in our project. And for that, you can just open up your terminal and run npm install, and we need to install Prisma as well as the Prisma client. So we need also, we also need access to @prisma/client like this. Run the installer, and let's wait for this to install. And once it is done, we would then need to, set up Prisma in this application by initializing Prisma. Okay, so I'm gonna give this a moment, and while this is still going on, I want us to just take some time and take a look at the Prisma documentation, because there has been a new change in Prisma version 16.19.0. And now we're going to have like two files. The first file we have is the one we always know, and that's the schema.prisma. And you can see these changes that we have here. So now we don't need to provide this data source DB, of which I found, couldn't still work out because it was affecting generating the Prisma client, as it always needed this data source DB. Maybe it's still a bug, I'm not quite sure. And we don't need this provider. We need the provider, the output, and the engine type, but no longer coming from Prisma client.js. We can now use this Prisma client. And we also need to add additional drivers, and this is going to be added in our Prisma client setup, because when setting up Prisma, we need the singleton, which is the single Prisma instance. And for that, we're going to create a Prisma client setup. And for that, we also need to set up an adapter as an optional parameter. And the reason why we need this is the case where we are using a full PostgreSQL database. So we need to add the necessary driver. In this case, we need to install @prisma/adapter-pg. So let's also copy this and run the installer. So npm install @prisma/adapter-pg. We're going to need this when setting up the Prisma client. And then we also need to either you migrate to Prisma config.ts, or if it's a new project, as our case, we're going to have the prisma.config.ts. And it's going to be our new home for configuring our Prisma project. Over here, we import the .env package so that it loads the environment variables. In this case, it's trying to access the database URL, and it knows our schema, which is the schema.prisma. It tries to join it using the path from the Prisma folder, and then we have the schema.prisma. We don't need to make use of path in our case. We're going to see, how we can, locate the schema Prisma and give it to this defined config file. All right, so in case you see the code not looking like you're used to when spinning up your Prisma client, this is the reason why. So let's come back to the application, and now we need to initialize Prisma in our project by running the npx prisma init command. So let's give this a moment, and you see now it is done. So it created the Prisma client at prisma/prisma.schema.prisma, which is this. Now, temporarily, I'm going to take this off, but as the documentation says that we no longer need this here by having this minus here. You see that we might need this after all. So, but for now, I'm just going to comment this out. But in case it changes at the point of time when you're watching this video, we might not need this. And then we also have this Prisma config that was created at the prisma.config.ts as the root of the folder of the working directory, which is here. And I'll just leave this open because we also need to install. So you say Prisma would have already added database URL, okay, but it already exists in the .env. So if we come back to the .env, you're going to see your database URL and also direct URL. If you don't have this, I must have added this before now, but no worries, I'm going to show you how you can get these two values. And we have this for our app pooling, and we have direct URL for our migrations. And we also need to install .env package and add the imports. I'm going to copy the import already, as we saw in the documentation, and I'm going to add it right inside the Prisma config. I'm going to add it right to the top so that it loads the environment variables first. And then we need to install the .env package. Okay, so let's do that. npm install .env, and then we need to run Prisma dev to start the local Prisma server. We won't be needing that now, and Prisma migrate dev to migrate your local Prisma Postgres database. So no worries, we are going to be doing that shortly. All right, so let's go over to the .env. We need to, have the database URL. If you don't have it, this should be generated automatically, not the direct URL. You need to add this yourself. It's more or less the same value, and let's get it from our Neon database. So if you come over to your Neon console, and here you hit on connect, you're going to see that you have your connection string. I'm going to click here, and it's going to expose the password, and I'm going to copy this. It's important that you create yours, because obviously I'll be deleting this once I'm done with the project, and I would update this direct URL we have here. And that's the same, sorry, for the database URL, and that's the same for the direct URL. Just update this value you have here, and everything is fine and good. All right, so we need to create the Prisma client next. But let's take a look at the schema.prisma and also the Prisma config. Let's start from the Prisma config. So we already know what the .env.config package does. This goes on to load our environment variables. And then we have the define config, which gives us just this types, like editor friendly configuration, where we already know what, if you go into this, you can see what it needs from this Prisma config, and this you can know, what it takes in here, which is the values that we are providing here. And this env key that we have here, it safely helps us to read the environment variables. Okay, so in this case, the database URL, this .env package makes it possible for us to inject the value here, and it uses this env to read it off from the .env file. Okay, so we already have the schema. Remember, I told you that we are not going to be needing like this path over here to create the path here, just as it does it over here, because in our application we can just go over to the Prisma schema.prisma. It knows where the Prisma where our schema lives. The same for the migration, it knows the path where our migrations live. And then for this classic, is just like the current stable engine of PostgreSQL. Okay, and yeah, that's all we have here. And the schema.prisma, we know our provider, and we know the output is going to be in the generated /prisma file. All right, at this point in time, we're going to be creating our Prisma client, and for that, I'm going to do that in the lib folder. And here I'm going to create a file called this prisma.ts. And in here, first, let's bring in the Prisma client. So I'm going to import the Prisma client. We don't have this yet, because we want this to come from the @generated client. If you don't have this, we need to run the command that is going to, because this is going to try to generate it in the source folder, which we don't have. So I'm going to get rid of this, but we're going to have the generated and Prisma. Okay, so run the npx prisma generate, and it's going to give you this generated folder just in case you don't have it. And you see the error I was saying, okay, because it needs us to have this. Okay, so run the npx prisma generate command again, and it's going to generate the Prisma client, and you would have this generated folder here, Prisma and the client. All right, so once you have that, we can continue in the Prisma file. And the next thing we want to do is to also bring in the Prisma PG that we installed previously. So now we're going to bring in the Prisma PG, and this is going to be coming in from at Prisma and then /adapter -PG. Okay, so let's have our const global for Prisma is going to be equal to global this as unknown as this object where we're going to have the Prisma, and Prisma is going to be optional and it's going to be of type the Prisma client like this, and we can close up the object here. Okay, and now we need the adapter. So adapter is going to be equal to new Prisma PG, and then we can pass the option here for the connection string. So for connection string, we are going to make use of the process.env.database URL, just as we saw right here. So new Prisma PG, we give it the connection string, and we have the adapter here. Okay, so let's continue. So const, we need to export const Prisma, or I think we can just say const Prisma is going to be equal to global for Prisma.Prisma. If it's available, use it. Otherwise, you're going to use the Prisma client with the adapter here, just like this, which is going to be equal to the adapter that we defined right here. And the last thing we want to do is to check if process.env is equal to production. In that case, global.Prisma is going to be equal to Prisma. And once we are done, we can now export default Prisma like this, and we are good to go with the Prisma client. All right, so we have the Prisma client, we have our schema.Prisma, we also have our Prisma config. Prisma has been all set up in our application. Now we need to come back to our UI and see what we need to do. We need to create a URL, and the URL is going to look very much like this. Let's take a break. Let's come back and create this URL, a schema in our schema.prisma file. This is going to be a very quick and short video because all we want to do here is to try to model what this URL looks like. We know this URL is going to definitely have an ID, a created at, and updated at, but here it has the shortcode which we want to output for the user. And then it's also going to have a target. We can call this over here the target URL. And this is like the created at, which comes by default, also with the updated at. And maybe we also want to keep tracks of the number of clicks the URL has had. And that's about it for the URL. So let's define this and make sure that we sync our local Prisma, our local table, with what we have in our Neon DB, which for now, if you come over to the table, you're going to see that it is currently empty. We don't have any table. Just give this a moment for it to load up, and we can confirm it doesn't have any tables. All right, so 0 tables in the public schema. Let's change that now. So we're going to have our model, and we can call this URL, and this URL is going to have an ID. The ID is going to be of type string, and it's going to be at ID, and the default is going to be the CUID like this. It also has a shortcode, and the shortcode is going to be of type string. It's going to be unique, and maybe we also want to say at DB varchar, let's say 20 here. And then we're going to have the target URL, which is going to be of type string, and then it's going to be at DB text. We also want to keep tracks of the clicks. The clicks is going to be of type int, and the default is going to be 0. And lastly, we need the created at and also the updated at. So the created at is going to be of type datetime, and the default is going to be now, and the updated at is also going to be of type datetime like this, and it's going to be at updated at like this. Okay, so now that we are done writing the model for our URL, now is the time for us to have or generate just to keep track of the migration history. So we're going to use npx prisma prisma migrate, and then we're going to say migrate dev dash name, and let's give it the name of init. Okay, so once we are done with the migrations, the next thing we're going to do, we're going to like try to sync what we have locally, so what we have defined here, to what we have on our remote database here. So if we come over to tables, it's currently like 0. We don't have any tables generated. So let's keep an eye on this and wait for the migration file to be created. Somewhere around here we should have the migrations generated with this init name. So let's give this a moment. Yep, so it is currently like applying the migration. It has, this is the timestamp and the underscore name in it, and we can find this in the Prisma migrations, and we can see the migration SQL here. This is the SQL, and then we're going to push this over to what we have here. So we can refresh this. We're going to see that, yeah, we have this synced here like this. So we have the Prisma migrations and we have the URL. So it has the ID, the shortcode, the target, the clicks, the created at, and as well as the updated at. Or you can just like force push it npx prisma db push and you skip the migrations. But in this case, it's always a nice practice to keep, you know, the migrations around. All right, so now we have, you know, defined the schema Prisma file. We have written out the model for our URL. We have also created this Prisma instance. We have our Prisma config. The next thing we're going to do is to now make sure that we write the test. We continue writing our test, and now we can create a component that is going to display the links. So we have so much to learn and so much to set up. Let's not waste any more time. We need to write more tests, and we need to write a test. We know we need a component that's going to display the list of URLs. So how do we start? Let's start by creating our test file first. So here we're going to create a components folder. We already have one, and inside this components folder we are going to create our recent hyphen links. So we're going to call it recent links, and this is the test.tsx file. And let's also create the component. So recent hyphen links.tsx, and for now it's just going to be we can export function, we call it recent links like this, which for now isn't going to do anything, and we're going to start by writing our test first. So for now we can just render these empty fragments into this so that we can import it in our test file. Okay, so let's start here. How do we write a test for this? We're going to start by having our describe block. Describe needs to come in from retest here. And what component do we want to test? So this is how we do it. So the recent links component like this, we're going to give it this description. We want to quickly test the default. So this component is going to also, like, if it doesn't have any URL, we want to make sure that this is being displayed. Remember, we wrote out the test for this previously. So we're going to test, and we're going to say given no recent URLs. So here, given no recent URLs prop, then in that case it should render, then in that case it should go on and render the other component. So here it should render this other component, because this no recent links card is the component that displays when it doesn't have any. We want to go on and make sure that it renders this component here like this, and we know what that component does. Okay, so this is our callback function, and we want to create the props. So props is going to be equal to create props. We don't have this function yet, and you might not really be used to this style when it comes to like writing tests, but no worries, we're going to go through it now. And we want to pass recent URLs, which is going to be an empty array, because we want to pass the props to this component here. So this component is going to definitely take in the list of URLs, and if it doesn't have any URL, then it should display this recent links here. Okay, so now we need to create this function for create props. Now create props is going to come here and say, we can say const create props, and create props is going to be equal to this function here, and this function is going to be returning an object here. But now we need extra configuration for this. As you see, we are trying to pass in a prop here. This create props is going to be a function that creates the props, and it's going to take in the URLs. So here is going to take in the recent URLs. Now these recent URLs, we can like give it an initial value. In this case, we are going to overwrite the value here. And the initial value for these recent URLs is going to be an array of a function, a pure function that is going to help us create these URLs. And we can also initialize it to an empty object. So this is going to be like an empty object for the prop. And here, we don't just want to return an empty object all the time. We want to make sure that we are returning the recent URLs that this create props function receives. Now, how do we know the type here? Because we just guessed this recent URLs. It could be anything, and this function is going to be fine. But we want this to make sure that it is creating the actual prop that this component is going to need. So what component is that? This recent links component. We know it's going to take in a prop because we want to display a list. So how can we go on and fix that? So for us to do that, we can have a factory function which is going to take in any shape, and then we can overwrite it by passing a partial of that shape. Let's do that. In our root folder here, actually so it actually gave us the source folder for source generated. Sorry, this is a little bit off topic, but let's see. I don't know why it gave us the source folder. We don't use it. But let's kindly ignore it for now. Okay, so in the root of application here, we need to create a utils folder because we need utils now. So I'm going to create this utils folder, and inside of this utils, we are going to create a type utility. So types.ts, and we are going to export type, and this type we're going to call it a factory type, which is going to take in the type. So it could be a TypeScript type, or it could be an interface. We're going to give it the name of shape, and this is going to be equal to an object. So it's equal to a function that is going to then return that actual shape. So you see this factory type is a generic type. It takes in the type and it returns that actual type. Now we can also like try to take in an optional parameter. So we can call this object, which is going to be a generic type, and then it's going to be a partial of this shape that's, we pass to this function. And this is so useful because we can now make use of it in our recent links. Now, rather than have this create props just, we are not sure of what it is doing, we can now make sure that this create props is going to take in the factory type. And this factory is going to come in from our utils types. Now, this factory is going to need factory of what type? So what's type? And in this case, we need our recent links props, which we haven't defined yet. So recent links props, we are going to be defining this right now in the recent links component. Okay, so let's do that. Actually, we can do that right in the test. So let's maintain that in the test. Over here, we're going to have our type recent links props, and this is going to be equal to the component props. Component props needs to be imported from React, and this component props is a generic type, and we can say this is going to be a type of the recent links component. So types of recent links, which we need to import. Yeah, it gives us this error because this recent links, it's a function. It's a TypeScript component, it's a function, but for now it's not taking in any input. And that's why we have this error, which we're going to fix in a moment. Cool. So we have created the props here, but also we want to make sure that we pass in some types to these recent URLs. Let's make sure we are not forgetting that. And this is going to make us to create what we call pure functions in JavaScript. So it's going to take in one. We're always sure of giving the same input, we always get the same output. And for that, in the root folder, we need to create a features folder. So here I'm going to create this features folder. And right inside this features folder, we are going to create one for our URL. And then we need some factories. We're going to call this URL-factories. And then .server.ts like this. And we want to create a function, a factory function that is going to help us to create a URL. So for that, we can export a const and call this create populated URL. And this is going to be of type return a factory type here, which is going to be a factory type of what? We want to create a populated URL, hence it needs to take in our URL, which would come in from @generated /prisma/client. And for now, I'm just going to quickly close this up like this. Cool. Definitely we have an error because this, we said it needs to return this URL type, and we're returning an empty object. And here we are initializing this input to an empty object, and we can now pass in the props, the input here, and also return them inside here. So no worries if it looks confusing, it's all gonna make sense, especially by the time we start making use of it. So we need to bring in have ID because our URL has an ID type. If we come over to our schema Prisma, we know it has an ID. And this ID, let's install this package. So npm install at parallel drive. Hope there are no typos /cuid2. Okay, so run the installation, and now we can already bring in the create ID, which will come in from the package that we just installed. So create ID like this, and create ID needs to be imported. So let's import create ID, and this is going to come in from @parallel drive cuid. Okay, so we have that. We also need a short code. So here we're going to have a comma and have our short code. And for the short code, we need a function that we are going to use to create a unique short code. And we also need to test that function. So for now, I'm just going to hard code this. But we're going to come back to this shortly. And then we also need the target. So can I format? No. And the target is we can make use of Faker library. So we don't have Faker, let's install it. So npm install @faker-js/faker like this, run this installation. And now we can bring in Faker. So let's bring it in here. So import Faker from Faker library. So here we can make it of faker.internet and then .url like this. And I'm just quickly going to collapse all of these that we have here. Okay. And then we need more. We also need the created at, and created at, we can also use Faker. So created at can be equal to faker.date. And then we can say faker.date.past, and let's say past 1 year. So maybe created 1 year, so years 1. Like this. Okay, and let me manually format this. Okay, and after created ads, we also need updated ads. So let's have updated ads. And updated at is also going to be faker recent. Let's say recent days is going to be 10. And we also want this to refer, so have a reference date to be created to, point the reference to the created at. And lastly, we have the clicks, and the clicks is going to be, let's go with this, int minimum 0, maximum 1000. And now we need to return everything. So the ID, the shortcode, the target, the created at, the updated at, as well as the clicks. Now, why do we have this error? Updated at doesn't exist on this type. All right, so let's verify our schema Prisma. Okay, so this should be updated at. Okay, so whenever we make a change, we also need to generate the Prisma to the npx Prisma migrate. We can give it the name of fix typo. Maybe you noticed this earlier and you did not have the same error as I currently do have. And we also need to generate the Prisma client. So npx Prisma generates, which is going to regenerate the Prisma client, and it should know we have this once it is done. So it is done and it knows, and the error is gone. So let's have our migration that also updates the migration history. Okay, so while it's at it, I'm going to save this. And the next thing we need to do is to create a function that is going to help us to generate the shortcode, and we also need to test out that function. So I'm going to see you, and you see the chain on how we can go on to write code in this unique way, where every part of our application is fully covered. And now we are creating a function that is going to generate the shortcode. And trust me, we are also going to need this function in future when we are building out our application. At that point, this has already helped us, to, be one step ahead of time. So let's come back and create this function that's going to help us to generate this unique code. Okay, so we need this function. We can give this function a name already. So let's say we give it this name of create unique shortcode like this. And this shortcode has a length of 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And we're going to give this like 4. So the function that does something like this. And then we expect this function to generate a unique code. I'm just going to see if I get some Copilot help here for better comments. And I'm just going to give this like this. No, it gives me the wrong, it gives me the wrong comment. Let me see if this helps. Okay, so I'm just going to get rid of this. But normally, you want to, add comments like this to your code to make sure that, you have this. Yeah. I'm just going to leave this like this. Okay. And if you hover on this, you should see the comment when you import this. Okay, so let's have this create unique shortcode. And we also need to write test for this right away. So I'm going to create inside this features URL, we need the helpers now. So we're going to create this URL -helpers.server.ts file. So helpers, and then we have the .server.ts file, and here let's export function and create unique shortcode. Is going to take in the length, which is of type number, and we can save ourselves the stress of this. TypeScript is going to infer the type from the return that we are returning a string, and here we can give this a default of 4. So that means here we don't need to pass in the default, and let's also import the function into here. But I'm just going to leave the default of 4. So now this gives us an error because we are not returning anything from this function. So let's go on and test the function before we can build out the function here. So what do we expect for this? I'm going to create another function here for the test. So URL-helpers.server.tests.ts. Now this is like the unit test of our application, and let's write the test for this function. So how do we start? Let's start with our describe, which comes in from vtest. And I'm going to give it the name of this name over here. So this name, and I'll call it because it's a function, so that when we see the description, we know that we are looking at the function. And now we're going to have our callback. So what is the first test? The first test here is we can go on to test that given, we can say given no length. So we want to test out the defaults. Then it should go on and return a should return a string of the default length, and the default length is 4 in this case. Okay, so now let's have our function where we are going to write out our actual test. And here we're going to, it's going to be simple. So we're going to say code is going to be equal to create unique shortcode, which we need to import right into this file. And then we're going to have our expect. So expect should also come in from vtest. So we want to expect the code to have a length of 4, and test should also be imported from vtest. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is to run our test. So let's come back here. So where we have this here, and I can say test dot only like this. I only want to run this test. Let's see if it picks it up, and we can say npm run test. And I'm just going to, expand this a little bit more. So now it runs our test, and our test is passing, and that means this shouldn't be dot, where do we have it? So our servers, so this test over here, it looks like it's not, it's actually, I left this on the wrong side. Sorry, I'm going to get rid of it, and I needed to have this here. So test dot only like this, and run this. Now, for some reason, this test is not being picked up, and let's come over to our vtest config. So for our unit test, there's it. So it's looking actually in the test folder. So I'm going to change this to what we have for this. And now with this change, it says like everywhere where you have the test.tsx, it doesn't explicitly have to be in the test folder. Our vtest should be able to pick it up now. So it runs the test, and the test fails. Why? Because target cannot be null or undefined, and that is the case currently. Okay, let's fix it now. So, or we can write more tests. So let's, have the test, and then we can build out our code, the function. Let's continue right in here. What other tests do we want to test? We want to test that given a length, it should return a string, because we need to somehow generate this unique code. It depends on how you want to do it, if you want to use a library for it, but we are, building this out ourselves. And now we can have another test and says given length. Now it should return a string of that length with only allowed characters. So I want to make sure that using this is going to output the string of the allowed characters. So I'm going to close this up here like this. And the first thing I want to do is to have the characters. So const the characters is going to be, and how can we generate this unique string? Let's say we make use of ABC up to the letter 9. So ABC onto Z, and then we make use of the uppercase, and then 0 to 9. It just depends on how you intend to build out this function. And then we can have our code, and the code is going to be, let's make use of 10. And the next thing I want to do is to go through each character of the code here and make sure that it contains this. Okay. So we can have for const character of code, and then we can expect the characters to, that includes, and we expect to include the character. And then we can have, and we expect this dot to be true. I think we're missing out something. Okay. Yeah, so we don't need this here. and we actually need this here, and then we can say it to be true like this. And why do we have this error? Yeah, because this for now doesn't like return anything, so no worries for these errors. And we can also go on and check. We expect the code to also have a length of 10. Okay, so we're also testing out the length here, and I'm just going to wrap this up real quick. We still have like let's say 3 more test cases. So we want to test giving no length. We also want to make sure that given no length, it should generate it generates different codes most of the time. And the reason why I say this is because it's not really a unique, even though we use it in application like create unique shortcode, but from these characters, most of the time there's that likeliness of, you know, of it, let's say, creating the same twice. But for a more robust application, you want to make sure that it's always unique. And here we can just say randomness test or something like that. And we can close this up. I'm just going to get rid of this test. And here what we want to test. So we're going to like try to generate 2 code and make sure that they are different. So we can say const code 1 is going to be create unique code 2, and then we expect code 1 to not to be code 2. Okay, so let's have these 2 test cases. I'm just going to bring them in just so I believe you get the idea. So this is saying given a length, it never returns an empty string when the length is greater than 0. So here we are saying, I'm going to give you a length and make sure that you don't return an empty string. It's explicitly the same as, you know, testing out this length here. And lastly, we're saying, when I give you no length, do go on and return an empty string. Okay. So that's it. If we reload this up, we're gonna definitely have enough test cases that are failing. So now let's fix them. So 4 tests are failing. Right here, I'm going to start by building it out. So we need the characters, and we also like need the shortcode. We can select code, and the code is going to be initially an empty string. And I want to loop through the characters. So this is going to help us. We say for let I equal to 0, and the I is equal to the length. So the length, and then we I plus plus, and we can just get this code. So let me just do this here. We can say code is going to be plus equal to the characters we have here, and then we can use math.floor, and math.floor wants to say math.random multiplied by the characters.length, and once we are done, we go on and return the code here. Once we save this, all our tests should pass, and our tests are passing. So now we are sure that whenever we look at our test, we are sure that code 1 is not going to be equal to code 2, so it gives us a random unique shortcode. We are sure that whenever we give it a length, that is going to return a string of that length with only the characters that we use in building out this code. And we expect it, we are sure now that, you know, all these are covered, but let's also have this in mind that this sometimes, rarely could fail, but rarely could fail. So it might be flaky, this. Okay, so now we have our shortcode. Let's make sure that we are making use of it here, and we are. Now we're going to come back and continue building this up, because now we have this factory function, a pure function. We are sure that whenever we give it the same input, it is going to return the same output, and the output it returns here is the URL. So now we have this, and we can use this anywhere without having to, you know, stress ourselves all the time by creating, you know, different populated URLs. So let's come back and let's do that. We had to branch off a little bit to create this unique shortcode function, which helps us to generate a unique shortcode. So for now, let's come back to writing our test for the recent links components. And here, no worries, once we set up the component, this error is going to go. Okay, so let's have this recent URLs here. I think we can go one level further and, you know, initialize this to some values. Let's say some recent links. Now that we already have the create populated recent links, let's make use of it. So const, we can have our create recent links, And this is also going to be a factory type, which is going to take in factory here, which is going to take in the recent links props. And this props is going to be an array, but now we want to like try to access an object, let's say of the first object of the array, because that's going to be the type. So what we can do is by, saying, hey, we want to take the recent URLs, and for that we want to go for and take the first element here, and we want to return this. Oops. So then we're going to have our equal to and have our function that we close up here. And here inside here, we're going to, have our object, which is going to initialize to an empty object like this. And what do we want to pass in here? So it takes in the partial type, and that's why this factory is important, because it can take in this object type, which is the partial type of the shape, and the shape we are passing here is this shape. And now we're going to pass the ID. The ID is going to be coming in from create populated, and let's see if we are exporting it from here. Create populated URL. So create populated URL. We don't get any suggestions. Okay, let's bring it in. So we're going to import create populated URL from here, and then this can be create populated URL. We call the function, and then we say .id like this. And why do I have this error? Because this is meant to be equal to here, and it's good. So the next is the shortcode, and the shortcode is going to be, create populated URL. The shortcode, we have the same for the target, also the same for the created at, the updated at, and the clicks. And now we still leave this, empty, and now we can return everything. So the ID, the shortcode, the target, the created at, as well as the updated at, the clicks. So we have our create recent URLs. We can use them here and say, hey, the recent URLs is going to be an array of this. Let's say we want to have this value twice here, and that's what we have. So we have the create props. It takes in this recent URLs, which this function, so recent links, is going to be taken in. So this recent links is going to take in the recent links props. And here we are like creating those props. Okay, so let's finish up this test. Now we need to render and make use of our render, which will come from at test/react test utils. Want to render this and spread the props. And why do we have this error? No worries. So what is our expectation? The expectation is whenever we render this without any link, it should then display this component. So that's what we are trying to test here. It should render the no card links. So for that, our expectation should be what this node card links displays, and it displays the recent links and no links created yet. So let's test that those are being rendered on the screen. So we need to expect needs to come from vtest. We need to expect the screen. Do we have screen here? Nope. Let's also bring in screen like this. So we need to expect that screen dot get by text no links created is displayed. So I'm gonna do like this and say no links created yet. Okay, that's it, right? Yeah, that's it. No links created yet. Okay, and we want to expect this to be in the document. Okay, and the other thing we want to test is recent links. So we want to expect heading, the name recent links to also be in the document. All right, so then we're going to save this, and let's not forget to get rid of our only that we dropped out, we left in the factories. So give me a second. If we come over to features here, we have our test describe.only. So I'm going to get rid of it there, and here our test is now failing. So one failed. Okay, so we're going to fix it, and I'm going to fix it in this video. Come over to the recent links component, and in this recent links component, we need to, receive the props, which is going to be of this type. So the type is going to be recent URLs, which is going to be of type URL, which comes in from our generated Prisma client, a URL array. And you see all the errors here leaves automatically. So the first one to quickly check is the length. So this test is saying, hey, given there are no recent URLs prop, it should render this. Okay. And I think that description is a little bit misleading. So giving no URLs props, giving no recent URLs. Okay. So giving no recent URLs, or giving an empty array. Given an empty array, we should return this. Exactly, I think that's more descriptive. Okay, so let's now fix it, and we say if there is no, we need to destructure it here. So we can say if there is no recent URLs, then we should go on and return the no recent links card here, like this. And once we save this, our test should now pass. Now it fails because it's not able to get no links created yet. And let's visit this and see what we display. Yeah, the full stop actually sold us out. So let's come here and make sure that we add the full stop in our test, save this, and it fails. Actually, it fails because of how we make use of the check we are currently doing here. So we are checking if there is no recent URLs. And in our test, actually, there is, because we pass an empty array. So it's a truthy condition. And an empty array is truthy, so our condition is false. Okay? And what we can do, or what this means is, like we're saying, recent URLs is equal to undefined, then show this. Whereas recent URLs now is equal to an array, so it doesn't go on to show this component which displays this text that we are trying to assert for, and that's why we get that error. So you see, what we go on to output is this body and the div in this case. Now, and that's why we have to test. That's the good thing about testing, because errors like this, they are so easy to spot out. So what we can do to fix this, number one, we can check if there's no recent URLs. And then we can also go on to check. So we're going to use this OR operator right inside the if block like this. And we can check if recent URLs dot length like this is equal to 0. Or we can go and say like this. So if there's no recent URLs dot length. In that case, after fixing our code implementation and saving this, we are going to see our test pass, and all our tests now passes. Cool. And you see, it just reruns the test that, failed here, which is like the hot module reload for testing, what we discussed when we were taking a look at vtest. Okay, so we need to continue building out this component here. And let's come back and let's work on this. Now we're going to come over to the recent links component, and here we're going to need a scroll area from shadcn UI. So let's quickly come over to shadcn components and search for scroll area. So click on components. Let me just refresh the page. And for scroll area, so this is what we need. So something like this that we have over here. So you can see this block here, so it's like a scroll area. And for that, this is the installation. So I'm going to copy this and add this right inside of our project. So npx shadcn at latest add scroll -area. And let's come here just under the card header. I want to have our card content, and the card content is going to have so our card content is going to have the scroll area, and this scroll area is going to have a fixed height. So let's give it a height of 400px, or you can give it a max height. And then we're going to have a div, and this div is going to have the class name, and the class name here is going to be space y3. And then we're also going to give it a padding right of 2, and inside this div we want to display the recent URL. So we're going to say recent urls.map, and we're going to have each URL, and we are going to now return here. So notice this is parentheses, and there we have the object. So we are more or less returning in here, but we don't want to return an object, we want to return a div. So let's have this div here, and this div, you know that is going to need a key prop. So let's say the key, and the key is going to be the url.id, and we can give it some class names. So the class name here is going to be flex items center. We're also going to give it a justify between, a gap of 4. We are going to give it a padding of 3, rounded, so some rounded corners, and let's say rounded LG, and give it a border. And in here, so inside this div, we are going to have another div, and this div is going to have a class name. So the class name here is flex of 1, and also a mean width of 0. And here we're going to have our paragraph. So this paragraph is going to be displaying the slash, and then we're going to have the url.shortcode. And let's style this paragraph, give it the class name of text sm, so text sm. Then we're going to give it font medium, text primary, and that's about it for the shortcode. Now let's save, and let's see if our test passes. So I'm going to quit this. At least the one for the shortcode should pass now. So one failed. And which test is failing? The entire test fails, okay, because it's one test block. But yeah, we're getting there. So after this, let's have for the target, I'm just going to bring this in and gonna change the styling. So for this is text s extra small, and it's also going to be text muted foreground, truncate, and let's give it a margin top of 1. So empty 1. And after the target, we want to display the date. So here we're going to have the paragraph, which is going to display the dates, and we need to format it just as we did in our test. So let's begin format from date-fns, and we're going to pass the new date created at, and the format we used was this here, otherwise our test is going to fail. So let me spot what is wrong. This needs to have this quote here as well. Again, we're going to style this paragraph. So let's give it some class names of text extra small xs, and then we're also going to give it a text muted foreground and a margin top of 1. All right, and lastly we need to display our link. So just after this div, let's have our link. Link should come in from next link, and I'm going to move this to the top. All right, and this link is definitely going to need a href, and this is the href, the shortcode. The target is going to be underscore blank. The rel is going to be no opener, no referrer. I'm going to come to the class name in a bit, and now we can, for now, just have visit. So we also need to give this an area label, which we're going to use for our testing. So area-label, and the area label we're going to give here is let's say visit the url.shortcode, and this is going to have the class name of shrink, and shrink-0 text primary, and on hover we want to give it a text primary 80. So here on hover, not on the line, you can give it on the line is a link, but I just want to give it text-primary and then /80 like this. And rather than have visit, we're going to have the external link icon, no suggestions, no worries. And this is going to have a class name, and the class name is going to be a height of 4, width of 4. So this needs to come in from Radix UI. Sorry, it needs to come in from Lucid React. So let's bring it in. We're going to be importing this from not Radix UI. Let's bring it in from Lucid React, and we save this. All our tests should pass now. So let's give this a moment. It failed because it expected this, but it received this. Okay, so what's wrong here? You see here we have /s, but we are missing our link. So we are missing this /l here. So now we need to make sure that that is fixed. And to make sure we fix this, and this is why it's always good to test. So it's expected the href to be, because in our test over here, we are expecting to have a link that looks like this. So /link and then the shortcode. But in our case, we forgot it. So here, let's make sure that we put it in. So is this href, it should be /l and /. And now, once we save this, our test should pass. So give us a moment and our test now passes. But that's not all. We need to write more tests for this component. We need to make sure that if we give it more than 10 URLs, because this says your last 10 URLs. So let's say if we give it 12 URLs, we want to make sure that it doesn't display the entire 12. And we want to make sure that if we give it a target, like a specific target URL, we want to make sure that it renders that target URL correctly. You can add as much test cases as you need to make sure that your component does what you expect of it. So we're going to continue writing more tests in the next video. Let's make sure that if we provide this component with more than 10 URLs, then it goes on to display just the 10 URLs and it doesn't display all, more than 10 URLs. We're going to start by first, writing our test. I'm going to collapse these two tests that we have already written so far, and we are going to have another test. And let's say we have given recent URLs, prop with multiple URLs should not render more than 10 links. So more than 10 links, because let's say that's our product requirement. And now we're going to have our callback function, and inside here, let's have this recent URLs. So recent URLs, which is going to initially be an empty array. And now we want to push. So we want to make sure that we update this recent URLs. So we're going to say for let I is equal to 0 and I is less than 15. So this is going to help us to push 15 links inside here. We're going to have our recent URLs.push create recent links. So it's going to help us to create. And an alternative would be for us to manually come over here and have this up to 15 times. So this is just a handy and helpful way for us to do it programmatically. Now we have our recent URLs, which we are sure now is going to be, or is going to contain 15 recent links. Let's have our props, and our props, we're going to pass the recent URLs to be equal to recent URLs. So we are overwriting the 2 that we had when we initialized this. Okay, we get our props. We need to render the component and pass in the props, which we have done. Now, the first thing we're going to do is only 10 clickable links, okay? And let's have the links. So const links is going to be equal to screen, and screen we have get all by row, and the role of a link like this. So get all row by, you see, is going to return an array of HTML elements. It takes in the role, which is by role, match, and some couple of options, which in this case we don't need. This gives us the link, but we want to make sure that these links have an exact length of 10. So we gave it so much links, but want to make sure that it displays only 10 links. For that, we're going to expect the links. So we can expect links to have length, because it's an array, to have a length of 10. Now I want to make sure that the shortcode actually looks like what we do here. So /1234 or something like that. And for that, we're going to use regex, which I'm going to actually paste in. You can just Google all these regex online. I'm going to paste it in here. So we have the screen, the shortcode text, and we get all by text. And this is going to give us a text that looks exactly very much like this, which is a case that we need in our application. Now we have the shortcode text. We'll also make sure that they have the length of 10. So the shortcode is going to get all shortcode that matches this pattern here. And we can expect the shortcode to have the length of 10. Now we want to also validate the order. We want to make sure that the first link here, the first link that we created, like the first link that we passed to this component, we also want to make sure that the last link is the link that we passed over to this component. Now I'm going to come here and let's validate the order. So we're going to expect the shortcode text like this dot test content. So we're expecting the first one, test content, to be equal to the recent URL. So this recent URLs now. So the first one that we get here, we want to make sure that this first one is going to be equal to the same first that we have in these recent URLs. Okay, so we are going to expect it to have the text content, and the text content is going to be backtick, and then we're going to have recent URLs.shortcode very much like this, and we should close this up here, and we can do the same. Now you see here the 9th index, which is going to return the 10th element, which is the last one, because it should display only 10. So we expect this to also match the recent URLs here. Saving this is definitely going to fail. So once we have this saved, it's going to fail because we haven't written our code to cover for this. And it expected 15 to have the length of 10, but we got 15. In that case, we can make use of slice. So we can come here and say recent URLs.slice, and we're going to slice 0 to 10 like this to take the first 10 elements. Now with this change, once we save this, our test case should now pass. So we're going to give this a moment, and it fails. And why does it fail? It fails because received value must be a node. So why do we get this error? And for us to know why we get this error, let's pay a visit, because it points here and say, hey, to have test content, something is actually wrong here. So let's go and see what's actually wrong. So we have our expect shortcode text this. Oh, we don't need this test content, okay? Because we're saying, hey, to have this test content. So it's like saying the test content should have another test content, and that's why we had the error. So for that, we should just work directly with this, and now we save this, and our test case all passes. Yes, it does. Cool. So we can add more tests. We can just quickly come over here and say, hey, let's go on and test that given a specific target URL. So given a specific target URL, it should render the target URL correctly. You can go on and try this on your own. You can try to create the props, give it a target URL, and you can expect the target URL, write the test for this case that given a specific target URL, it should render the target URL correctly. I'm going to give you a moment for you to try this out, and we're going to do it together. Okay, so let's do it together. We're going to have our const specific URL, and this is going to be equal to https://youtube.com/@code with lari, which you should actually visit. And the recent URLs is going to be, let's say we have, or we make use of the create recent links, give it the target of this specific URL. We know that this create recent links is what we defined over here. And see why this is so useful, because it just goes on to create this link for us with this target URL that we pass. So now we give it, we're going to give this prop just this recent link so on, and we're going to render the recent links component, and we're just going to check. We're going to expect our screen.getByText, the specific URL, to be in the document. We save this, and our test should pass because that's what our component does. Let's have a preview actually and see how our component looks like. This is the beauty of writing tests. You see, you're building your application and you don't have to manually come over to the UI at every instance to like refresh, which you should do, okay? And that's also another need for the end-to-end testing. So we're going to see and try to simulate user interaction. We don't see anything because we don't have any recent links to play around with. And this is a perfect time for us to create a seed.ts file so that we can actually seed the database with some dummy URLs. Let's do that. I think we can do that right in this video, or otherwise I think the video is quite long already. So let's come back and create the seed file so that we can seed our database with URLs that we can play around with. So I'm going to see you shortly. I'm going to close all these files, and right here I'll create a seed.ts file inside the Prisma folder. So let's create this seed.ts file, and the first thing we want to bring in is the .env.config, just in case we want to make use of environment variable. So let's bring in .env/config. It should always be at the top of the application, and we're going to also need exit from node process. So bring in exit, which should come in from node process. We also need our Prisma client. Our Prisma client is going to come from @generated. It was actually in the source. So @generated, generated Prisma and /client. And lastly, we also need to bring in our create populated URL. It's going to come in so handy here. So let's bring in our function create populated URL from our features URL factories.server file. So then we need Prisma. Prisma is going to be equal to the new Prisma client, and we can have the async function, which we call seed. And let's have a console.log. So console.log seeding database. We can have an emoji here. So let me see if I can have an emoji here. Maybe I call it link. And then we're going to create, let's say we want to work with about 20 URLs. So create 20 fake URLs, okay, that we're going to work with. So const URLs, and we can use the array from and the length 20. So array from, and give it a length of 20. And we also want to dot map. The reason why we make use of dot map is so that we can have our create populated URL. Here we know it's going to give us this URL, and we have our array from 20. We map it into our create populated URL. Now we have the URLs. Let's go on and await our prisma.url, and then we can have .create many and give it the data which is equal to the URLs here, and skip duplicates true. And let's have our URL count. So const URL count is going to be equal to await prisma.url.count, and then we can log to the console seeded database with this URL count URLs, and we can also console.log maybe here console.log. Let's just have this, which goes on to say URL seed summary, something like that. Okay, and now we have this function called seed. We need to make sure that we make use of it. We're going to have seed, we're going to call it, and then we're going to make use of .then, and then it's going to be this async function. We want to make sure that we disconnect the Prisma client. I'm also just going to bring this in. We want to make sure that once we are I'm going to bring this down, log to the console, seeding completed successfully, and then we need to go on and disconnect. And in case of any errors, we definitely want to log the error to the console, and we want to also disconnect and call exit 1. Okay, so this is time for us to run the seed.ts file, and for that we need a package that we are going to make use of in the package.json to enable us run this script. And that package is going to be the tsx package. No worries, we're going to install that in a second, but let's come over to the script section, and here we can call it prisma seed, and this is going to make use of the tsx, and then we can go one level up into the prisma, then the seed.ts file. We don't have this yet because if we try to execute, this is definitely gonna fail. So let's try to seed. If we say npm run prisma seed, it's gonna fail. So I'm gonna do npm install tsx, and I will install that as a development dependency. Wait for this to install, and once the installation is completed, we can now run our npm run prisma seed script. This is gonna go on and give us dummy data to work with. So it's currently seeding the database, which is what we have here. Then it goes on to fail. And why does it fail? It fails because cannot reach the database at this. Okay, so I believe if you've worked with databases from Superbase or Neon, most likely we get this cannot read database. So it's more or less it's like sleeping, and now it works. So it was able to see the database and seeded database with 20 URLs, and it's completed. So now let's npm run dev, and if we come over to the browser, give the browser a refresh, we want to see a list now with 20 URLs to work with. So we save this, and we don't see any we don't get any display actually, and that's because in our page.tsx we are not even displaying the component. So if we come over to the page.tsx, we would see so on the app page, we are not even displaying that component, and that's why we don't see anything. So what we're going to do, I know we haven't started writing the end-to-end test for this page, so we are trying to get ahead of ourselves, but it's always practice. There's no straight line to follow. It's always practice that when you're doing all of these, it's always good to always check on the screen. So now we're going to have our main content here, and in here we're going to have our div, and this div is going to have this class name. So let me give it a class name of grid. We're going to give it a gap of 8. We also want to give it an md grid goes 2. So grid goes 2, and in here we're going to display the form. We don't have the form yet, so I'll just have this placeholder for form, and we want to go on and display the recent links. like this. And we also need to fetch the recent, URLs and pass it here. So quickly, I'm just going to have this recent URLs is going to be equal to recent URLs. And this function, this homepage, we can go on and fetch the URLs. So let's do that quickly. Const recent URLs is going to be equal to, we can have await and want to await retrieve recent URLs from DB like this. And we don't have this function, and we also need to mark this homepage as an async function. So let's make sure that we retrieve the recent URLs that we have in our database, because if we check our database, so if we come over to our neon database here and where can we refresh, you're going to see that we now have a list of 20 URLs which we seeded right inside the database, and this is what we have. Now I'm going to come back here and let's have this. So this is going to be back in our features. In our features URL, we need a model. So here we're going to have a URL-model.server.ts, and we are going to be exporting async function. And this async function retrieve recent URLs from DB. We know that we want to retrieve 10, so we can have a count here, and count is going to be of type number and is going to be equal to 10. Or we can let TypeScript infer the type from the usage. If you hover on count, you're going to see it's going to be of type number already. And it's actually best practice sometimes to let TypeScript infer the type here. And we're going to return Prisma. So we need to bring in Prisma from our lib Prisma. We can have prisma.url.findMany. We want to order by created at in descending order. I want to take the count that we have here, and let me use AI to quickly have some better comments here and say retrieve recent URLs from database. Bring this down. We don't want to close this here. I was actually expecting it to do a more better job than it did. So does it? Nah, it doesn't give us more. It's meant to give us the params. So give me params counts, and what else do we need, and what it returns. I think this is better. And now we need to import this. The formatting here could be better as well. So let's import this. So I'm going to come here and bring this in. And if you hover on this, you're going to see our comments, which actually I don't see for some weird reason. It's meant to have the comments on the usage, but I don't see the comments. But no worries. Once we save this and come over to application, we should see the list rendering or displayed here. Cool. This is so beautiful. We have our 10 list items being displayed. We are sure that our application is fully tested and covered. Now we're going to make sure that we have the end-to-end test for this. We want to make sure that this also works. Before we go on to write the playwright test, actually at the point of recording, Prisma is currently as version 7, and I actually did upgrade. If we come over to the package.json here and we search for Prisma, you see now I'm on version 7. So I want to show you how you can also migrate to version 7, and for that we are in the official documentation prisma.io, and if you come over to the docs section here, you would see that the commands or the script to run. And here let's start by coming over to this use Prisma manage Postgres or bring your own database, but here we're just going to come over to this Next.js guide, and in this Next.js guide there's some prerequisites like the node version, but we're not going to set up like Prisma ORM. That's what we want to do. We want to set up Prisma ORM, but we actually are not going to sign up and let Prisma manage our database with, here. What we're going to do is to, after you have the create next app at latest, which we do at this point, and we are currently in the project working directory. Now we need to run these commands, which is going to install and configure Prisma. Now, this is the first command here, npm install Prisma tsx types /pg, and these are going to be a development dependencies. So run the installation if you don't have them already. I'm just going to paste them in. So npm install Prisma tsx, and that's types /pg. And what else do we need? We also need to install Prisma /client, Prisma adapter, Prisma adapter -pg.env and pg. We more or less have these packages, but just to clear some doubts, if you can just run the installer again, and everything should still be fine. What else do we need? We already have the npx prisma init command, and there's actually something here now that changes. You see here, define your Prisma schema, and here you have the client and you have the DB. Now, if you come over to your, I'm sure the installation must have completed. If you come over to your Prisma schema, you would see over here, we no longer, I added this. I'm going to show you or tell you why I added this, but we no longer need this URL here. So I got rid of this database URL. And if you try to bring it back in, you're going to get some errors like data source property URL is no longer supported in schema files. And then it says move connection URLs to migrate to Prisma config.ts. I need that EPAS adapter and all of that. So we don't need URL here anymore. And if you come over to the Prisma config, this is what we have, the data source URL here. So it knows, and this is what got us covered. And something else here, I did get an error. You can delete this generated Prisma folder. So once you delete it, everything is going to be fine. But I did get an error, so I'm just going to comment this line out. Maybe in case you run into the same error, you would know what error that is. So let's run the npx prisma generate command. And this is going to regenerate the Prisma client, which is this here, right here. All right, so the error was coming out from here. Now I don't see the error, but no worries, let's proceed. I'm going to proceed with this commented out, and if we see the error, then we will bring this back in. All right, so what do we need to do at this point in time? Yeah, so we want to test out the homepage of application to make sure that it actually renders these recent links. Let's come back and work on that next. We're going to need to run the test, the end-to-end test for our homepage spec, home-page.spec.ts, which is under our Prisma homepage, and this is the test for the homepage. So we already have this from previous test the user visits. Given the user visits the homepage, it should display the correct title as well as the correct description. And for this, given the user visits the homepage, it should display the correct header title. Now let's make sure that these are still working as expected. npm run dev is going to start up our local preview, and then we can go on to run our test. I'm going to hit run here so that it runs both. And remember, you can get this extension by coming over to the extensions marketplace and searching for playwright. So we'll go on and install it, and once you install, you would also be able to run the test here, and this test are passing. Now you might say, hey, how come I'm not seeing it? It actually does show up on my other browser, and I'm going to show it to you by coming over here and bringing it here. So this is it passes, and everything is working as expected. Now we're going to add more test cases, and we want to test. So let's come over here and have it here. So we want to test that given user visits the homepage, what do we want to check at this point in time? We want to check that, let's test with no recent links. So with no recent links, and now we expect it to display the no recent links component. So should display no recent links components. All right, just like this. And then I'm going to close this up right here. And fine. Now let's come over to the page.tsx. Now, whenever there is no recent URL, so these recent URLs, we know that this is going to get rendered, the no recent links card, and this no recent links card then goes on to display this heading as well as this description. Now we need to make sure that whenever the user visits the home page with no recent links, that it does what we expect it to do, which is displaying the no recent links component. And how can we go on and test that? So we are going to first of all go to the path. The path is the / which is our home page that we want to test. So we're going to first of all await page.go to path. There is no setup or initial setup that we need to do at this point, because we are testing that there's no recent links. So we don't need to see the database with links or do any of that. By default, there are no links in database. You can always verify, come over to your NeonDB, and this is why you should have different environments. So different environments are used for testing. Now this could be your test Neon database, and then you're going to have the same for the production, so that you can be flexible enough to actually write to the database as a user would do, and Also update the database, make sure that everything is working as expected. And then you're going to have a dedicated database that is for your production. All right, so let's come over to the tables. It actually should be empty. You know, we have the seed from previous, so maybe it's populated. Let's go on and wipe the database. Yeah, it's actually populated. So I'm going to delete 50 records so we don't have any record in our database, and delete 10 more records here. All right, so now we are sure that our database is empty. We can visit the path, and when the user goes to the path, we want to check recent links heading. So I'm just going to leave this comment here, or maybe I just leave the comment. So we're going to get no recent list card. So page.get by row heading, and this is not like the card. So this is the heading that we are getting here. So let's update this to be recent links heading. Oops, recent links heading, like this. So we're going to say page.get by row heading because it's heading, a H2 heading, and that's how we have this level 2, and the name is recent links, just as we do have here, and the same for the card description. And let's go on and test for that. So we expect this heading to be visible, and then we expect the no recent links message, no links created yet, like this. I'm going to add the full stop here, and then we expect this to be visible because here that's what we have, no links created yet. So this is no links created yet. Now let's run this test and watch it execute, and then we should see the card display. So now it tries to go to the path. You can see your terminal here, so it's compiled successfully and the test passes. I don't get to see it, so this is it here. This is it on the UI. It shows recent links and no links created yet. Cool. All right, so the next thing we're going to test is recent links. So I want to make sure that we test it with recent links, and then we get the recent links that are displayed. Now for this, we need to make initial setup. We need to see the database because we need the links to display, and we want to test that when these links are there, they display as expected. So let's start. So test giving user visits. So giving user visits visits the home page. I can't type, you know, I really struggle with typing and talking at the same time. Home page with recent links. Now we expect it should display recent links component with links. Cool. That's what, you know, that's what we want to make sure that it displays the recent link component alongside with the links. Now, what we're going to do for the setup is going to be, we're going to make use of our create populated URL factory because we created that initially, and you see how this comes in so handy and helpful. Because if we come into our features, we have the URL factories.server.ts, and we have the create populated URL. Now, this is going to create this populated URL factory type that models this URL that we have. We can already take advantage of this function that we have and use in our test. So this is going to give us links, which is going to be equal to an array of create populated URL. So let's bring it in, and we don't need to initialize it because it initializes itself. You can see it takes in this object, which is an optional, and it could be a partial type. For now, we don't need to update any of the type. The default types that we get here is going to work so fine for our test, and we just need to pass in, you know, how many links. So we want to have 2 links here, and this is very much okay for us to test. Okay, so now we have these links. We need to go on and save the link to the database, and we need to also create a helper function because the URL model for now only retrieves. We don't have a model that we can use to save to the database. We're going to come to that in a second, but this is what we intend to do. So we're going to await promise.all, and then we're going to have the links.map link, and we're just going to return, let's call it create short URL in DB, and then it's going to take in the link. We obviously have an error here. Either you do this way or you use prisma.create many. Anyways, let's come over to the model and have the function. So I'm going to bring this in here. Do I have some comments? Let's see. Yeah. Okay, so So this is what we want to do, create short URL in DB. Let's go through it. Now this is going to take in, let's call it input, and the input is not going to be of this type. And that's why it's always good to, go through the code that you get from any AI model that you're using. So this is going to be Prisma, which is going to come in from our generated Prisma. And then we need the URL create input. And now the data here is just going to map over to the input that we are bringing in, and everything is going to work fine. Let's also see if we can make use of create many. Let's see, create many. Okay, so let's see. Yeah, so we can already make use of this. So create many short URLs in database. Then it's going to take in a list here. So we can just call it and pass in this list of links that we have over here. Whichever you prefer is going to work fine. So, but I'm going to work with this create shortened URL in database. And let me improve the comment that we have here. It's not a function that we need, but if you just to show you how you can do things differently. All right, so let's make sure that we import this right into our test. And now this is going to create 2 links in our database. And once we have those links, we can now go over to this path. Now let's do this. We have done our setup. Now we're going to navigate to the path, and we expect the heading recent links to be displayed. So this can come in. Now we also can check for the description. So let's go and get description. And description is going to be your last 10 shortened URLs. And we expect the description to be visible. Now, in case you're wondering what description, now remember in this page, it displays these recent links. And this is what we are trying to test, that this homepage, when there are links, now in this case, we have 2. So this is going to not, like, this if block is not going to be executed because, the conditions doesn't match up. So the length is going to be defined, and there's going to be recent URLs. So this is not going to be executed. Now we are here, we are testing this, and we're also like checking this, and this is what we are writing in our test. Your last 10 shortened URLs, your last 10 shortened URLs. Okay, so let's continue. We also need to check the list elements, that it has the links of 2. Now let's also do that. So I'm going to say const here. Let's get the list elements or links elements. It's going to be equal to page get by row link, and the name is visits because that's what we have, right? Yeah, f visit. Yep. So come back here, and now the link elements, we expect it to have a count of 2. Now I'm just going to have 2 here, and now you say, hey, what's 2? Because here we have 2, and that's why we have the length of 2, and then we also expect this to have the length of 2. So because we created 2, we expect our UI to only display 2. Now we're going to check for the shortcode, and we want to also ensure that they are displayed correctly. So let's do that. So we're going to use this for of loop. So we're going to say for const links of link, const link of links, and here we're going to get the shortcode element. So how do we get by shortcode element? We can get it by this text link.shortcode, and then we want to expect that it is visible. So we're trying to just make some assertions regarding these links that we get here. We want to make sure that the link is visible. We're also going to check, so for the shortcode, we want to make sure that it's visible. We also want to make sure that the external link works as expected, because we want to make sure that we have this. So we want to make sure this works as expected. Whenever we click on it, it has this target underscore blank attribute, which makes sure it opens up in a new window. So let's test that. But let's complete the shortcode elements. We expect this to be visible. Now we're going to check the link element. So the one with the external link icon, which is this one, the external link icon. We want to make sure that it's an external link. And how can we check that? Let's get it first. So const external link, and the external link is going to be page.getByRow link, because it is a link. It's wrapped in a link element. and the name is visit, and then the link shortcode, which is the name here. So visit, and then the url.shortcode. In our case, we called it link because we're in a for of loop here. So what we're saying over here is give us access to that link. Okay, and now we have access to it. We want to make sure that it has the href attribute. So this href is /l and then / the shortcode. Let's write the test for that. We're going to await external link to have attribute, the href attribute to be /l and then the link the shortcode as we saw. And we also want to make sure that it has the attribute which is target underscore blank, and we know target underscore blank means open up in a new window. And let's test that. So we want to test, we are also going to await that so that it has this attribute. Okay, so I'm going to save this, and we can already test this, even though we can add more tests, inside this test block. But I want us to do some cleanup because we are creating two links in database. It's just good practice that we clean up the database after our test. And here I'm going to leave this comment for cleanup, and then we're going to say, you can always say await promise.all. We don't have the function for delete yet. We're going to create it in a second. So we're going to have each link, and then we're going to say delete short URL, or we can say delete short URL from DB, and we're going to be deleting it by delete short URL from DB, and we're going to be deleting it by ID. All right, so let's make sure that this exists. I'm going to take this and create this right into our model. So here, now it's going to say delete a shortened URL record from database by its shortcode. Actually, it's not by its shortcode, it's by its ID. So I'm going to update this, delete shortened URL record from database by it is not the shortcode, is the ID. So I don't know why it takes this as shortcode. Param should be ID, and the ID should be of type string. Okay, so this goes on to run the delete. Now we're going to make use of this function right here. So let's make sure we import it here. It's imported, and now we're going to say link.id, not link.shortcode, like this. And let's save. So I'm going to save this and run the test. Now let's quickly check our database. I'm just going to give this a refresh. We're going to see we don't have any records here. By the end of the test, we're not also going to have any records because we are doing the cleanup. So you see now, I don't even get the opportunity to run this test here, even though we have the extension. And if we come over to our package.json, you would see over here, we have this script to run our test. Now let's execute this test end to end. I'm going to run this script, and you're going to see it's just not going to work as expected. We're going to have issues. The first issue we have here is exports is not defined in ES module scope. Now this is the error I was telling you about, and the way I got to fix this error, if we come over to the schema.prisma file right here, this is what fixed it up for me. So I'm going to bring this back in, shut off my terminal, and let's delete the generated folder again. You see that this error just comes from this spot over here. So let's run the delete, and now we have that code back in. So this piece of code, we can say npx prisma generate, which is going to have this output here in generated prisma, and we should not have the error. If you have the error, I would say kindly ignore it. It should be a false alarm at this point. One way you can find out is you just reload your Windows. So I said Shift Command P, and then I have access to this developer reload window, and then it goes on and refreshes your window. I don't see the errors, and maybe that's because TypeScript is still initializing as I refreshed the window. I don't see it here for now, but maybe TypeScript is still initializing. And yeah, so let's go on and try it. We're going to have another error actually, but npm run dev. Let's see the error, and then I'm going to show you the fix for it. So let's see, do we have the run here? We should have it. TypeScript is back, and now we have this. So I'm going to hit run here. We're going to have another error. I'm going to show you the error, and it could be so cryptic, it could be so difficult to debug. So it's trying to load up here on my other browser. So this is it. It's trying to load up, and actually it passes. So we did not have the error, and the reason why it passes. So let's take a look at our playwright.config. Now this is what makes it pass. Okay, so this is the code I had from previous when I got the error. I added it here, and now I'm going to get rid of it so that we are like, on the same state. So I'm going to get rid of this and, quit the server, try to run the test again. And now you would see the error that I had from previous. So I'm going to hit run again. This is going to run our test here, and maybe it has failed already, and it has. So you see here, it's like saying, hey, database library does not exist on the database server. And the reason why this error shows up is because here we didn't have the .env loaded in our playwright config. Because we are running this on the playwright test environment, it's not able to pick up our environment variables like here where we say that, hey, for the Prisma connectivity, make use of database URL, and this database URL is from the env, and in the env we have defined our database URL. But Playwright isn't able to magically know our environment variables. We have this here, and it needs to, and that's why we need this. So I'm going to bring it in. Either you bring in this that were commented out from previous, or you just bring in this code, more or less the same. So .env.config, this is configuring the path within the path, and then say resolve to the current working directory, and then .env, more or less the same, which is like the default. So if we save this, that's why our test was passing, and you come back to the homepage.spec.ts, you give this a refresh, your test is going to pass. Now let's take a look at the UI as the test is running. Give this a moment for it to go to the page, which is the home page. Now it has, and it's currently executing. Now you see we have two links and our test is passing. But because of this cleanup we have, if we check our database, so I mean this cleanup we have over here, we shouldn't see any URL. So let's refresh and be sure that everything works, and no rows, 50 limit offset 0. All right, yeah, let's continue adding more test cases. So at this point, what would we like to test? We want to test that the target URLs are also displayed. Okay, so let's do that. I'm going to come over here and have another for of loop. So const for const links of link of links, just like this. We want to await expect page.get by text, so the link.target. So await page.get by text, and get by text is the link here, and link.what, so the link has its target here, and then we want to make sure that this is visible, so dot to be visible like this. And what else? We want to make sure that the created at dates are also displayed, so we shouldn't ignore these dates that we have over here. So we have the target tested. We are sure that the target is going to be visible, and now let's quickly check that the dates are displayed correctly. So we're going to have for const link of links again, and now we want to let's format the date. So const formatted date is going to be equal to format, and format is going to come in from date-fns, which we have just right here. And this is going to take in the new date, which is the link.created at, and the format we use here is this double P like this. And that's what we use in our homepage. Where do we have it for the date? This. All right. So we want to make sure that the date shows. Now we can await expect page dot get by text formatted date. We expect it to be visible. All right, so now we are done with this. Let's run our test again and watch our test pass. So it's loading up here. It looks like yeah, it's loading up. Okay, give this a moment and our test should pass once it is able. So now it's trying to visit the path, because it first of all have to do this setup, and once it does the setup, then it can visit the page and we can have our expectations. Okay, so we still have more test cases to write. I think we have 2 more test cases to write, or 1 more test case. And now we just want to make sure that if the user visits the homepage with recent links, it should not display more than 10, because this over here is not displaying the first 10. And if we lock up this functionality in our test, we are quite sure that if another user comes or the functionality or requirements changes to 4, we are sure that we also need to fix our test to pick up this new requirement. Now that's why it's important for us to test it. So we're going to say test given the user visits the home page with more than 10 links, it should display only the last 10 links. So that's a good test description. Now we're going to have the links here. So const links, we have different ways of creating this. But I think I'm just going to go with this. So this is also going to work. Yep. So this is going to give us links, which is going to be, but now they're not like stored in database. So this is just creating this in memory. And now we need to promise that all the links, we're going to have each link, and then we're going to create a short URL in database. And that's what it's doing. This first creates it in memory, and now we create it in our database. All right, so now we have the links. This is our setup here. We now need to visit the home page. So let's await page.go to path. And now we are here. We don't need to like test the heading. We already like test it here. So we don't need to repeat it over here. But now we only need to ensure that 10 visit links, that's the link component, are being displayed. So const, let's call it visit links. And this is going to page.get by role. Name is going to be equals to visit. And we expect these visit links to have a count of 10. Okay, and now we also want to get the shortcodes text elements, and we know that the shortcodes, they have this format. So let me give this here. So get all shortcodes text shortcode text elements, and we know our format for this is so we have the slash, and then we have the shortcode, which could be ABC123. And now we're going to say const shortcodes is going to be equal to page.locator, and then we can say where the text equals to, and we can have some regex here, which I'm not very much familiar with. I just got this up from the internet. I think I can actually paste it here. So this format here, like this. So we have the shortcode, which is going to be give us something like this. And now we have the shortcode. We expect it to have a count of 10. So const shortcode, not const. So we await expect shortcode to also have a count of 10. Now we also want to check the order because we just said, hey, 10, we are creating 15. We want to make sure that we are taking the first 10 elements. We want to make sure that, and we don't want to make sure that we are taking, let's say, the 15th element in place of the last element. We just want to ensure the order of elements. Now we can do this by checking that the newest link is going to be the 14th. So link, and the 10th link is going to be the links at position 5. So newest links should be at the top, and is so links, and then that is going to be links at position 14. Okay, and we can test this by saying await expect shortcode.first to have this text. Yeah, so expect the shortcode dot first. Now this is going to give us the shortcode in the UI. Now we're expecting the first one to have text, and the text is going to be these links that we have here that we generated here. So at 14th dot shortcode should also like be the same here, because like that was when we had it in our database. And we should also do the same. We should also do the same for the 10th link. So others link, which is the 10th. So we're going to have the 10th newest is link at 5. Now we're going to expect the codes dot last to have this text, and now we can do our cleanup. Because this is created, I'm not quite sure so much about this test because we are creating all the links at the same time, and the timing might really be, let's say, a little bit of an issue here, but let's see how it goes, because in reality, these links are going to be created at different times. So I'm going to hit send here. Come over to the Playwright UI. Yes, it's currently doing our setup. It's currently creating the links, and now it is done. It's trying to visit the homepage, and it's most likely going to break here because this added 10 links. Now it's like expecting this, yeah, and it fails. If we come over here, we see that it's failing. Now it is failing not because our test is bad, but because of the order that these links gets created. So let's fix this. We need to fix the way we actually create like the links. So what I'm going to do for now, I'm just going to get rid of all this code. Let's create it like giving them a 1 second gap is going to be the best way. So now for that, we need access to now, which is like the current date. So now it's going to be equal to new date. And then we're going to have links. So now this is like creating 1 hour path. I think it's quite long, but let's see, array from length 15. And then we have the callback function with the index. Now we have date, which is going to be like the created at. So I'm going to call this created at. And now we're going to have new date, which is the date dot get time. And now I'm going to get rid of everything here. So this is going to minus, and then 14 minus I. And then I'm going to multiply this by 1000. Now this is not going to be 1 hour apart. This is just going to be like 1 second apart. Yeah. And now we have the created at. We can return create populated URL, which is going to take in the created at like this. We have access to the links again. Now let's await promise.all, create the links. Then we're going to go to the path, and we don't need to test the recent heading. So once we are the path, let's do what we did initially. So const visit links, and visit links is going to be page.get by role link, the name of visit. We expect it to have a count of 10, and same for the short codes. Short code is going to be equal to page.locator, and let me bring it in just as I did previously. So here, and here we're going to expect to also have a count of 10, and let's check the order. So for the order, we're going to await expect code.first to have the links 14, and the last one should be this links at position 5. And after that, we can then proceed with our cleanup. Yeah, so this is how you can go on to write the Playwright test in your own application, making sure that you're testing how users go on to use your application. So the end-to-end test. We have more, like the user interaction, creating a form, all of that, making sure we are displaying the correct error messages. But for now, I think we can go on to run this and see if we have done everything correctly and if our test passes. So let's give this a moment for it to run the test, and now our test passes. Cool. So if we come over to the UI, you see the 10 links here, and we are sure that the first one actually is the first link here, and same for the last link here. All right, so thank you. We're going to see shortly. Hello, and thank you for taking out time to complete the part 1 of this test-driven development course. I hope and I wish you have enjoyed the course so far. We have actually learned a whole lot. We have seen how to, set up Prisma, the latest version of Prisma in the application. So here we have seen how to set up Prisma, how to run the migrations. We have also seen how to create a seed file where we can seed our database with data that we need to or we intend to work with. And the bread and butter of this course is testing. We have seen how to configure vtest in our project, in our Next.js project. And we have also seen how to configure Playwright in our Next.js project. We have also learned some functional programming practices here. If you come over to the features URL folder, you would see how we have seen how to create these facades that we can use, these functions that we can use in building out our UI. And we have also seen how to create unique types like this factory type that we make use of here. We have also seen how we can, a very good separation of concerns. Here we have test. We have seen how to test units of our application functions that we use in building out our applications. You have also seen how to test your different components, like we have this node recent links card test.tsx, which doesn't take in any props. We have also seen how to test components that takes in unique props. We have seen how we can go on to create props in a very unique way in our test, making use of different helper functions, also making use of our factory type. And then we have also seen how we can go on to write our Playwright test. So our Playwright, in this case, our home spec. We have seen how to test our application for the title, for the meta description. We have seen how to even run queries in our test, how to make sure we are querying elements, UI elements in our test. There's actually a whole lot more in store for us. We need to learn how to test user interactions. Now, in this case, for the part 2 of this course, we're going to test how the user can type into this input box. We are going to get access to this input in our test. We are actually going to type into them. We are going to try to submit this form without imputing any text, and we're going to make sure that we display the correct error messages that we intend for our users. We want to make sure that whenever we type into these boxes, that we get the output here. So we have a whole lot to learn. We're also going to see how we can set up our GitHub action, which is going to also help us to run our test whenever we raise a pull request. Now, a whole lot to learn. I am so excited to teach you all of these. Do leave a follow, and I'll see you in the part 2 of this course.